I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lincoln-Lancaster County Planning Commission of July 10th, 2019. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available at the front of the chambers with the clerk. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. If you parked in the parking garage across the street to the north, the gate is open, and no parking coupons are needed. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, the commissioners and the staff, cellular phone usage is not permitted in these chambers during any portion of this meeting. We will appreciate your cooperation. Please note that the Planning Commission action today is final on the following agenda items. Item 1.1, Special Permit 16029A. Item 1.2, Special Permit 19031. Item 4.2, County Special Permit 19030, and Item 4.3, Special Permit 19032. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or the County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or the County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held June 26, 2019, as revised.
Yes.
So moved.
I think Jerry has a comment.
I do have a comment. Okay. As the chair indicated, there is a revision to the minutes on page 4, the second line under staff presentation. It references the western portion of Lot 1, and it should state the eastern portion of Lot 1.
Okay, still move, Dean?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
Second, Beckius.
We're ready to vote.
Okay. Minutes for June 26th as revised. Beckius?
Yes.
Campbell?
Abstain.
Okay. Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Jerry to read all of the consent agenda items into the record, and once those items are read, she will ask if there's anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Jerry, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
Yes, item 1.1, a special permit 16029A to allow for a permanent rock crusher on property generally located at 1675 Saltillo Road. Again, this is final action on this item unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. Item 1.2 is special permit 19031 to allow for the construction of an outdoor recreational facility on property generally located at 3100 North 112th Street. Again, this is final action on this item unless appealed within 14 days to the City Council. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on the consent agenda items?
I see none.
Okay, is there anyone here wishing to speak on either of these items? If so, please stand and state that item.
Item 1.2, special permit 19031.
Okay, we will remove that from the consent agenda and have a separate public hearing under item 3 on today's agenda.
Okay, we will entertain a motion for the remaining item.
Move for approval. Campbell.
Second, Edgerton.
I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, this is for special permit 16029A, remaining on the consent agenda. Beckius?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
There are no requests for deferral, so we will now proceed to public hearing. The staff will make a brief presentation. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. If during your testimony you have copies of documents or materials you would like distributed to the Planning Commission members and/or included as part of the record, please provide that information to the clerk for distribution. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes. Then you will have 1 minute to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the commission votes to defer action or continue the public hearing. Jerry, please call the first public hearing item.
Okay, item 3.1 is special permit 19031 to allow for the construction of an outdoor recreational facility on property generally located at 3100 North 112th Street. Staff recommendation is conditional approval. Again, this is final action on this item unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
I see none.
Tom Chaka, planning staff. This request is for a outdoor recreational facility, for Prairie Pines Nature Preserve, which is located at North 112th and Adams. If it pops up here. So the recreational, there we go. Adams Street, 112th, this entire area. The recreational facility would consist of nature trails, gardening, special events, and educational events. Basically, it would be more of a passive recreational type use. Prairie Pines Nature Preserve is over 145 acres, property of woodland, grassland, wetlands, and tall grass prairie. The entire site is in a conservation easement, and the property is owned by the University of Nebraska Foundation and is maintained by the Nebraska Forest Service in collaboration with Prairie Pine Partners. To help support their goal and mission, they have special events from time to time out there as fundraisers. One example would be community crops. Under the city's zoning application in the agriculture district, which this is in, you're only allowed one amusement license per year that you could do just by right. The special permit for outdoor recreational would allow more than one amusement license. We're suggesting that be limited to eight events at this time per calendar year. So with the special permit, like I said, they're not limited to the one event. They still will have to get the amusement licenses through the county board, but they could have up to 8 with this special permit. The area's fairly isolated. There's only a few houses within a quarter to a half mile from this area. Adams is paved, 112th is gravel, so it'd be a very short distance of driving on gravel off of Adams to reach this area. Planning, of course, supports this special permit and feels that would be a very minimal impact to surrounding neighbors. Any questions?
Questions for Tom?
The applicant is comfortable with the 8 events per calendar year.
Yes.
Anything else? Thanks, Tom. Testimony from the applicant?
My name is Aaron Clare. I'm the properties manager for the Nebraska Forest Service, and I oversee management of the Prairie Pines Nature Preserve. I apologize a minute ago when you asked if somebody needed to speak on this. I thought that was me, so I don't know if I screwed up the agenda by doing that. Tom kind of mentioned what our situation was with the limited number of special events that we could have out there. I don't know if you are all familiar with the history of the property, and I'll just give you a little brief thing about that. The Prairie Pines Nature Preserve, it's 145 acres, zoned agriculture. It's got woodlands, grasslands, and a remnant tall grass prairie. When it was purchased in 1959, it was a typical livestock and row crop farm. And then the Bagleys started a Christmas tree farm there. And as that time went on, that property grew into the woodlands and the grasslands that are now habitat to all kinds of different wildlife. They wanted to protect the property, put the first environmental conservation easement on the property, and then donated it to the University of Nebraska Foundation. Now the University of Nebraska's Institute of Agriculture Sciences and Natural Resources leases that from the foundation, and then we, the Nebraska Forest Service, manage that on their behalf. We do that, and then we make the property available to the public in collaboration with the Prairie Pines Partners. They're the nonprofit group. And their mission is to provide nature-based education and natural resource programming. Previous to 2017, the property wasn't open to the public. And so in our effort to increase the public awareness of the property and interaction with it, we've started doing these activities, having open houses every once a month on the second Saturday of every month. And so those have been going very well. People like those. The response has been positive, and there's been requests for more access and more events. So because of all that interest, we came up with two other activities for this year. One of them is this the Meadowlark Music Festival in the Woods this coming Saturday. It's wine, women, and song. It's going to have 3 prominent women singers, music nestled in our arboretum with wine and food provided. And then Saturday, August 10th, we're going to have a Run for the Pines. It's a 4-mile run to raise funds for a connecting trail to the Murdoch Trail, which ends just up the road there. It's going to have a 4-mile walk for all ages, and then a toddler trot for kids 3 and under. And then at the end of that, there'll be food, beer, and live music, again, in the Arboretum. The number of people we anticipate for these 2 events is up to 200. We have adequate parking on the property, and people would enter and exit off of 112th Street. And as Tom mentioned before, while we were planning for this, we realized we couldn't only have one activity, and Community Crops has been there for a number of years. They lease property out there, and they have their annual fundraiser there, Feast on the Farm. That has been using that one special designated license, and we don't want to tell them, hey, you can't anymore, because we want to do stuff. So we met with the city and county attorneys and the planning department, and it was determined that the special permit was the way to go. So we got permission from the foundation to apply for that, and we've done so. And just to summarize, Prairie Pines Nature Preserve is supposed to be a refuge for all living things, and that includes people. And we think that it's a benefit to Lincoln and Lancaster County to make this property accessible to folks, and you can get out of the city and get into nature and find some refuge. So we think we've got the adequate parking and the access to do this. It's not going to have an impact on our neighbors negatively. So that's it for my testimony, and I'll take any questions.
Is the parking through the gated area?
Yeah, it's within the property, and then we have a number of areas that we've cleared out for parking and some little gravel roads that we can park in.
Any other questions?
I'm going to kind of piggyback on, how did you come up with the number of 8 for the permit?
That was what the planning department recommended.
Okay.
Based on the site plan that we were able to provide at the time. We really only had the 2 events planned this year. 8, well, if we get up to 8 events, we're really doing well. So I think we'd be pleased with that. The second Saturdays, as far as we understand, don't count as special events. They're just open houses. So the special amusement licenses, we don't need those very often. So we'd have 3 this year.
I'm going to play devil's advocate just because I know this is a pretty popular thing right now. What if someone approaches you and wants to have a wedding out there?
So far, we've decided not to do weddings.
Okay.
That's just something we're not, the logistics of that are pretty complicated. We've decided no for now, at least, until we have better facilities to handle people. Right now, we can bring in porta potties and stuff, and that's fine, but a wedding is a much larger thing.
Any other questions? Thank you. Other testimony we'll go to testimony in support. Do we have testimony in opposition of this item? Are there any other staff questions?
I have one for Tom.
Okay.
Tom, can you just verify that the open houses don't need a amusement license?
Yeah, when they're doing the the open houses are more of like an educational type event, so we determined those aren't big public gathering type events.
Great, thank you.
Anything else for Tom? Okay, thanks, Tom. Anything else that the applicant would like to say before we vote? Okay, then we'll entertain a motion.
I move approval. Sorry, go ahead.
Move approval, Edgerton.
I'll second Campbell.
Discussion?
In a previous life, I had the opportunity and privilege of meeting Mr. and Mrs. Bagley, and when they owned this property, and they would be thrilled that this was the use of the property and that the public was getting out there, so.
I also knew Walt very well and have actually toured the property. And I agree with you, Bagley's would be very supportive of this.
Good stuff.
Anyone else? I think it really enhances the use of the property, and I'll be voting in favor of the motion. I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, this is for the conditional approval of special permit 19031. Beckius?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Okay, next public hearing items, there's actually two associated items. Item 4.1A is change of zone 19018 from AG Agricultural District to AG Agricultural District with Historic Landmark Overlay, and the associated special permit 19033 to allow for the hosting of special events at a historic landmark, both located at 17185 Bluff Road. Staff recommendation for the change of zone is approval. Staff recommendation for the special permit is conditional approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these agenda items?
See none.
Okay, I would note that there have been a number of public comments submitted to the department, both in support and in opposition to these applications.
Stacy or Steve? Stacy.
I'll start with the landmark designation, the change of zone, and Steve's going to address the special permit application. So the property, as you see here, is located roughly at the intersection of Interstate 80 and Bluff Road. Oops. This is the Cooley Dodge Farmstead. It's an ensemble of well-preserved and well-maintained buildings that include a large farmhouse with a garage, a barn, a chicken coop, a corn crib, and a machine shop. The farmstead is surrounded by a shelter belt of trees and an open pasture to the north and the west. So this is a good example of the typical Lancaster County farmstead of the early 20th century. The house is in the American four-square style. It's oriented to the east towards the driveway. It has a two-story enclosed porch on the east side, and on the first floor that wraps around mostly the entire length of the south side as well. And you can see on the edge of the picture there the garage situated just south of the house. The barn is located in the south central portion of the farmyard, and its principal entrances face north. The barn's slightly asymmetrical, with the west pitch being longer than the east. The interior of the barn only has a partial upper level haymow, but there is an upper door on that end, and it's protected by a hay hood on that side of the barn. There's a drive-through corn crib that's now used as a stable, and it sits on the southwest side of the farmyard. And a small wood frame chicken coop abuts the corn crib. That's the picture on the top, and the photo on the bottom is of the machine shed, and you can see the corn crib in the background. The farmhouse and the outbuildings are well-maintained, and they're in active use by the Hartweg family. So the Cooley family was prominent in the early development of the Waverly area farming. Roswell D. Cooley, or R.D. Cooley, settled in Waverly in 1867, homesteading about 80 acres. And then the family began acquiring substantial amounts of property in the 19-teens. This farmstead appears to have been built around 1914. R.D. and his wife Mary Cooley had a daughter Carrie and a son Edward. Edward and his wife Edith were recognized as substantial members of the community, raising their 4 daughters and 2 sons on the farm through the 1930s. And Edith was honored in this article here as a master farm homemaker in 1930. And then the Cooley family lost the farm in the early 1940s and moved to 5 miles east of College View. The Dodge family, also in the title of the farmstead, owned the property for about 3 decades, from the 1970s to the early 21st century. So because of their long ownership, they're included in the name. This is the first landmark application in Lancaster County since its expanded zoning regulations for designating the historic properties. So this went before Historic Preservation Commission for their review, and it was unanimously approved, the landmark application. The special permit application that Steve's going to talk about was also unanimously recommended for approval by Historic Preservation Commission, under the condition that the future buildings or site improvements be reviewed by Historic Preservation Commission.
Okay, Steve Hendrickson with the Planning Department. I would note that it takes 2 planners to fill in for one Ed Zimmer. Ed is on vacation, otherwise he would be here covering this as usual. So the special permit, which is also now part of the first time in Lancaster County, is that once a property has been designated for historic preservation as a local landmark, you then have the option to use the special permit to basically, the zoning regulations allow any use to be allowed as a part of preserving the local landmark. And so in this case, the application is that on the north side of the homestead, just outside of the tree line, there would be an event center approved. It would be a brand new construction with a small parking lot on the north side. The site plan at this point is rather rough. They were first waiting to see if this application was approved before spending the funds. To get a more detailed, in your application are some representative of images of what they were looking at. Any final decision on the site plan and what the building is going to look like would go back through the Historic Preservation Commission for review. They wouldn't try to have something that is a false representation of history, but yet is something that is modern, but yet fits in nicely with the site. So something that falls in between brand new, modern, has nothing to do with the site whatsoever, and one that is trying to be a fake representation of history. What we then review, and as part of your charge as well in the county board, is what is the impact of that special permitted use on the surrounding areas. And so one of the additional pieces of information that Ed had passed along was an exhibit that showed the relationship between the site. So we have Bluff Road on the north side of the site. You have the 4-lane interstate on the south side. The interstate in this area probably has about 30 to 33,000 cars a day on it. The site itself is fairly sheltered from the interstate by the trees and an additional farmland in between. The event center would be on the north side. Bluff Road itself is a paved road. On the north side of the street is the rather large property that also has a special permit for the Camp Creek Threshers. They have about 4 or 5 events out there a year. They have a swap meet. They have their antique machinery show out on that site. They also have a railroad exhibition, and they've had a fun run, those type of things as well. So the event center, which might then host weddings, parties, that type of thing, certainly would, we find, be very compatible with the adjacent uses around it. Most of the residences, it's a little hard to see, this is actually about approximately 2,100 feet or nearly a half a mile away. A lot of the other residences are really actually on the south side of the interstate and range from about 4,000 to 3,500 feet away. There are a few residences a little bit closer, but most of those still ranged about 1,100 to a quarter mile away. In terms of the traffic flow, given that 90% of the county population is in Lincoln, it is logical that a lot of the people coming out to the site will probably be coming from the west and would come out Bluff Road. There is a overpass, but not an interchange at 176, so there's really not a way to get off there and come back from the east side. So most of it, the traffic was envisioned to be on Bluff Road. The county engineer didn't have any objection to the plan as presented. An event center typically is having an event maybe on a Friday or Saturday, and the peak is usually your spring, summer, fall season with a lot less going on in the wintertime. So with that and the recommendation of the Preservation Commission that the use as proposed in the special permit is compatible with the overall use of the property as a local landmark, we had recommended approval of it as well. And both Stacy and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions?
I have a lot.
Go ahead.
Okay, so, parking for this, will it be paved? Will it be rock? Do we know? Is there a requirement?
Good question. There's not a parking chapter really in the county regulations. And so I think we would look at that as a part of the future application as it came forward. Certainly in most of the city applications, we would have a proposal be paved. And some of our more recent event centers that we've had that have been approved as an extended home occupation in the county, a lot of those had a fairly strict limitation on the number of events they could have. So many of those were having grass areas for parking and were not required to have even a gravel parking lot, though any handicap parking does have to be paved. So that would probably be a detail that would be worked out as part of the application. And certainly always if there became an issue with dust, the health department does have the ability to regulate in terms of a dust complaint, or we would look at that as a part of the special permit.
Steve, when I was looking at the special permit portion, and you look under the site-specific conditions, it looks like 5.5.1 and 5.5.2 are exactly the same. Can you check that out for me?
You're correct. 5.2 could be
Okay.
deleted.
Can one of you talk about when we put a historic overlay on something, does that decrease their property tax bill?
I can try to address that. That's a completely separate decision of the county assessor. Ed Zimmer, long time having done this, had said that Norm Aganaw basically ignores that. We certainly view it as a restriction that is part of the give and take of the special permit in the local landmark. You can't just make any addition or changes to the buildings that you want. You can't just go out and demolish them like anyone else could within the county. Once you get the local landmark, that additional protection is an additional restriction. But of course, it also comes in with the special permit that allows for additional, very specific things that you can do on the site. So our understanding is that the county assessor certainly does not look at that aspect of it. Any new construction, of course, would increase the value of the property because you now have a new $300,000 building, for example.
So, in theory, there's no tax break for pursuing a historic landmark designation.
Not in the designation itself.
If anything, it's going to make it harder for the property owner to comply with, any changes, improvements, additions, that kind of thing to the property.
Yes, because there's additional layer of review there with
Now, I think perhaps some of the concerned citizens that wrote in might be confusing this with, you can get tax incentives from the state government for some of those improvements. But that would not cut their property tax bill in any way. Those are separate.
the state historic tax credits. New buildings wouldn't get those credits. It's reviewed by the State Historical Society, History Nebraska, and they compare all of the changes to the historic buildings against the Secretary of Interior standards, so there's even a higher level of review there. But that is a relatively short period of time, and you get tax credits for, I think, 20% of the amount of improvements.
Yeah, that's
Would have to make an improvement before they would see that tax credit.
Yes, but they're not applying for that. That's just the designation.
And so typically that's like in an older downtown building where it's run down and you're spending millions fixing it up. But that is to improve the actual
Historic.
local historic landmark. In this case, they are agreeing to preserve the local landmarks, but are not actually doing anything as a part of their improvements to it. I believe in our early discussions, they looked at potentially having the event center in the barn, but it would have actually required quite a lot of cost and changes to the barn to have it meet the fire codes to have 200 or 300 people inside it. So it was much better to not have those activities in the barn, even though that might have been kind of interesting to have done as a part of it. So instead, it's going to be a separate, brand-new facility that fits in with the overall site.
I would also note real quick that detached single-family residences don't qualify for the tax credits.
Good to know. Okay. And you guys have kind of already stated this, but I want to just double check. This new building wouldn't fall under the historic overlay. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. How do I want to say that better?
It is not being designated historic itself,
Right.
the new building.
So, they don't have to adhere to those older, standards, I shouldn't say older, historic standards when they're building this new facility.
They would, in that because of the condition that HPC has recommended, that it comes to them for a certificate of appropriateness.
Great. There seemed to be some question also about the AG designation for this land, and how is a business appropriate in an AG? Can you maybe expand upon that a little bit?
Sure. Our AG zoning district does allow other kinds of uses by a special permit. So we have recreational facilities, we have campgrounds, we have other things that are truly not farming. They're not raising animals or crops, but other things that are allowed in an agricultural area because they are sometimes often difficult to site in a city, like a campground, or even sometimes recreational facilities, or they're appropriate as part of the activity that is going on the site. You still have a large farm property here, even if a lot of the ground is just being used for pasture. And so this use is appropriate as a part of some degree secondary, but it's also accessory to the house itself. The house is still going to be used as a residence associated with the property.
However, because of the use that is contemplated in this circumstance, without the historic landmark overlay, this use would not be entitled to a special permit. Is that correct?
Well, the county does have an expanded home occupation special permit, so that might have been another route that they could have gone. In some of our other expanded home occupations for event centers, we've had a restriction on the amount of events, partly because they're limited to 2 people working on the site as a part of the event. And so often with a wedding or something, you might have 7 or 8 people at one time. So that restriction sometimes is a challenge with an event center, but we have 2 other ones that are working within that. Particularly the Hillside Event Center is operating with only doing 2 a month. So here the main difference is probably they will not have a restriction on the number of events. But I would also say, unlike Hillside, Hillside had some very immediate neighbors. Here you have very few near neighbors. You're on a paved road, and you have the interstate to the south. So the impact that you might have in terms of noise is probably going to be quite minor compared to the impact of the interstate noise itself.
Steve, through your process, was there any kind of evaluation of traffic on Bluffs Road?
Not in terms of a traffic study, no. Generally, the county engineer was looking at it. A lot of the trips are going to be off-peak, so you're not looking that there's a peak time here like you would have in the city. And the fact that it was paved, they didn't have a concern that it was a road that was already over capacity.
Other questions?
I do have one more, and I'm not sure that you guys are gonna know this. On the Camp Creek Thresher grounds, I know it stated there are a couple of residences. Do you know, are they used as residences? Do people live in them, or?
One is owned by the Camp Creek Threshers, but I'm not sure how it is used.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. We'll take testimony from the applicant. And this is for both items.
My name is Carol Hartwig, and this is Jed, my husband.
I'm Jed Hartwig.
Okay, most of what I had planned to say was already said through the questions, so I'm just going to kind of make this a little bit more brief than I had originally planned.
Don't worry, I have questions for you too.
I just wanted to kind of give a little history about our family, how we found where we currently live, and what our plans are. So I grew up on a farm similar to the one that we currently live, and I have a deep appreciation for the ag community. I still am part owner of that farm. My brothers and I operate it currently, and I don't want to take anything away from the ag community whatsoever. That's not our intention here at all. We currently do have farm animals, and we do have, some livestock. It's not an operating farm by any sense, but we do have some small animals and a couple horses. Okay, so skipping ahead. Several months after finding our property where we currently live, we ran into Mike Warner, the mayor in Waverly, and we were discussing what a great place we have, and we felt the same. We were discussing the paved road and how close it is to town, and Mike had mentioned, that would be a great place for a Christmas tree farm or a pumpkin patch. Waverly is growing, and there just aren't very many businesses around for such young families and just such a growing community. And we agreed, and we started to look into the Christmas tree farm idea. Also, shortly after that, there was the flood in March, and we also began to plan a fundraiser for the farmers and ranchers who were affected, including areas around my hometown. We found out through that process that our barn didn't meet any standards that are required for hosting any events. We would have to put in so much work to make that barn work for any event, including just a one-time fundraiser. So we canceled the fundraiser because we just weren't prepared for as many people that had responded, nor was our building quite up to codes and standards that were needed. Throughout that process, we did come down and meet with the county zoning, and we discussed our plan of a Christmas tree farm. We are entrepreneurs, so we've had several different ideas. We currently own a business in construction. We remodel homes and sell them. So we take dilapidated historical homes, fix them up, sell them. And that is going pretty well for us. So we don't want to quit our current endeavor. We want to add to it. We have received so many requests about our barn that we also started thinking maybe we should look into this a little bit more. So throughout the process of thinking about the Christmas tree farm, we also mentioned that to the county, and they told us that 17 acres is not adequate for a Christmas tree farm. You have to have 20 acres. So we just shoved that idea aside and started focusing more on the idea of a venue. And then realizing the expense was going to outweigh, really, it would be better for us to start from scratch with a new building away from our house. The shelter of the trees would protect from our home. So that is where we wound up with that idea. And then we've been researching and moving forward on that, and that's bringing us to where we are today. We've also talked with Mike Warner about the shortage of venues around Waverly. So we have found a need, and we do believe that we would be able to help our community in that way, and we would provide a nice building, and we have security in place already. So I think that's all I have.
Ready for questions?
Yes,
Okay.
How long have you owned the property?
a little over a year.
Okay, thank you.
Tracy.
Before I start with the questions, I just want to say, first off, I am very impressed. A lot of times when stuff like this comes to the commission, it's after they've already started having events and neighbors have been upset and that kind of thing. And so I really appreciate you doing your due diligence up front and exploring and doing all this research. That makes a huge difference from my perspective, and I'm sure from my fellow commissioners, so that we don't have a huge firestorm on our hands. So to me, that signifies that, I can tell you're already, entrepreneurs and know kind of the right way to proceed and have a good business plan, and you're going to be good business owners, property owners, that kind of thing. And that goes a long ways when you come up here. One of my questions for you guys was, do you plan to employ anybody? Is it just going to be your family working?
Just our children.
Slave labor?
Yes. Yeah.
So just,
Outside of the construction, no, we don't plan to employ anyone.
and then I assume, like, when you have the events, you're going to have, like the caterer doing their stuff,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Right.
Okay. Do you know, I know that you're pretty relatively new to the area, but the Thresher property, do you know, does someone live there? Do multiple people live there?
There previously was an elderly woman in the home on the Thresher grounds, and it's my understanding that she is in a nursing home, so I was not able to contact her or
Okay.
get a hold of her.
So right
directly,
now,
so-
the house would be
Yeah.
unhappy.
As of recently, yeah.
Yes.
Great. I think really that's all my questions for you guys. I'm kind of letting you off the hook easy.
In one of the comments or letters that we received, one person referenced that you had an agreement with the Threshers for using some of their parking for events.
We had contacted them when we had started the process to host a fundraiser for the flood
Right.
relief. We received 800 RSVPs on social media,
wow.
like very quickly, and that's how we realized, okay, we better check with count. We didn't realize we thought it'd be a smaller event. So when we started receiving so much interest, we contacted the Camp Creek because we knew 800 people was probably a little bit more than what we might be able to accommodate, but
So that was a
It-
backup
it
plan, it was a
wouldn't-
backup plan if we needed parking over there.
But not part of the plan going
No,
forward.
no.
our building wouldn't accommodate anything near.
Sure.
Right.
I did think of one more question.
Go for it.
Have you held any neighborhood meetings or anything like that regarding your project with your neighbors in the area?
I have stopped by the homes of, I know personally a lot of the neighbors, and I've introduced myself to several more throughout this process. I wasn't able to catch a couple that are beyond where we live or outside of the path, I guess you would say, but everyone that is on Bluff Road, or even the house that's a half a mile straight east of it or west of us, but they're not on Bluff Road, I met with them and they were in agreement, and I've also met personally with each family in the path of where the traffic would be, and I think almost all of them have written in support as well.
Great.
You anticipate that most of the traffic for your events would come off of Bluff Road, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so there was one mention of something on concerns about the area 176th and McKelvey.
Right.
That's to the south, and is that to the south of the interstate?
It's 1.6
There'd be
miles, I
no
believe.
traffic would be
And
down
I don't
there.
know why anyone would go that's not really on the path that most people would travel.
Right.
At all.
Thank
I mean,
you.
people coming from Omaha would most likely still go all the way to 148 to Bluff and backtrack. That's just GPS generally keeps you on a paved road. So, and that's south. I don't really see anyone going into that direction.
Not unless they were lost.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take testimony in support, and again, this will be for both items, both the change of zone and the special permit. Testimony in support.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Warner. I live out at Waverly, Nebraska. I lived there since 1981. I am the current mayor of Waverly. I did send an email to you all.
Mhm.
I did have some questions that I think got answered here today by me just listening. First of all, I do want to reiterate, the city and myself, I can just tell you, we support this type of a venue or this type of endeavor. That we struggle having a place large enough to host any sort of magnitude of size. I believe the Waverly Community Foundation will house 200, that's fire code. And if anybody wants to have any wedding of a magnitude or possibly a wedding anniversary party, 200 isn't near enough. You need something larger. I do believe the applicant has intentions of, if this does get approved and go forward, to make something in the 300 to 400 range. I would suspect that at least. I do like the idea that as they expand, that it is a restricted building use. I too am sensitive to Camp Creek Threshers. I'm not a member, but I do believe the area in general, not only this 18 acres, but that 80 acres, we need to be careful that we protect that if we want to keep some housing of how it used to be in the 1900s when farms started out in the threshing community where they could continue with shows. And I mean, we got our old city jail down there. They have a post office. So the whole area in general to me is kind of historic. I think of it as being historic. So if they do build a building to house an event, if all this is approved, I would ask that the people watch it, how they might want to make sure there's facades put on that blend the area so the building doesn't stand out, that it fits in with the general area. And so I was glad to hear that they put that on there. So again, I just want to reiterate, I support it. The city supports it. It needs a place for people to go of this type of a venue. Lastly, part of my email did state, I did check with Chad Lyon. He's our building and zoning person. We have nothing on our code books in Waverly today that deals with historic district overlays, preservation districts, these type of things. Your earlier map, although it's gone from there, if you've seen that there was a line west of her about a quarter mile, that's our ETJ. That's our extraterritorial jurisdiction marker. And it would be safe to say one of two things is going to happen within 7 years from now. Number one, I would say 7 years from now, we're going to be a city of the first class, meaning we're going to be over 5,000 people, and then our ETJ expands to 2 miles. So all of this will be ultimately within Waverly's jurisdiction. I would say it's potentially possible in 3 to 4 years, our ETJ will expand to touch these people. So I ask politely that, we don't need to do it today, but I think it'd be wise that our city and the county, and we sit down to see if you guys can help us amend our code, so we can include this kind of stuff and how to manage this kind of stuff within our code, because it's important to us too as well. There are a couple of homes in Waverly that were looked at this and they decided not to, but there's like an old bank, and so this could have a little implication on us that we need to understand how to deal with this type of thing. So I don't really have any more to add. I think that the traveling issue, the road being there, I have to kind of agree. I would envision the bulk of the people probably using Bluff Road, whether they come down 148th, which is paved, and going on Bluff. If they come from Omaha and turn on 162nd, they could drive a mile of gravel. I can say the county engineer, and the 1 and 6 year plan wants to pave 7 miles of 162nd Street, all north of Highway 6. I've made it known to the county commissioners numerous times. We want that mile added in. We would like to see that 1 mile of 162nd Street paved, and thus that would probably give a little more direct route into those folks. You know, it would give an option, let's say. So 162nd Street's used by a lot of farmers right now. They carry a lot of heavy loads of grain. It's real agricultural driven. So that's all I have to say. Again, I'm just in support of the project. I think it would fit well with our city, and I think they'd be a good neighbor to Camp Creek. And I think Camp Creek should take some steps too to protect that they can do what they want to do always. I mean, I really support those guys out there. So we want to make sure when we have zoning jurisdiction that if 30 years from now, 40 years from now, somebody buys land, wants to build houses, it might be, well, there's a buffer you're going to have to put up against these historical districts, you know, so they can continue with that way of life, we can say. So, you know.
Thank you.
When you talk
Questions?
to the county engineer about paving that section south of Highway 6, what is the response?
That wasn't the county engineer. I asked that the county commissioners expand it and put it on the 1 and 6. They wouldn't answer me. So that's still ongoing to see if we can get that 1 mile added onto that plan. To me, it would make sense because you're dealing with a hard surface road, a bluff road, going a mile to Highway 6, and you're going to pave 7 miles of 162nd going north, which is needed. But it'd be like, let's pave that mile as well to link those two paved roads together. So, but that was a county, I was asking them to please amend the 1 and 6 to include that 1 mile. They have not done that yet. Okay. I'm still aggressively trying to, hopefully they can do that for us, you know, so.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Testimony and support? Okay, testimony in opposition, again, for both applications, the change of zone and the special permit. Testimony in opposition.
I'm Clarence Aldhouse Jr. I live at 8650 North 134th Street, Waverly, Nebraska. I'll tell you that most of the comments that I'm going to make are based on the printed material that I had. I couldn't hear very much of the discussion that was going on here, and there may be more information here that's different than what I have. But I'll tell you what I had. And I am opposed to both of these things, and if you want me to remark on both of them at the same time, I will. First of all, for the landmark designation, in one way I really don't understand what that does anyway, but you know, I happen to probably have spent more hours on that property than anybody in the room. This where my grandparents were there. I grew up there. I spent a lot of times there. And I was around all the members of their family that were raised there through a lot of discussions and everything. My grandparents were humble people. They worked hard. And they helped lots and lots of people that needed help. But they never wanted any honor or notoriety. And I'm sure this request to make this a landmark would not have suited them. They would not have asked for that. They would not have wanted it. They would said, no, we don't expect that. We are same as other people in this area. They're just another family there. And that was always their position. And so I would certainly be against the landmark decision. Then, from what I understand, if it's correct, the reason you want the landmark decision is so that you can put up a commercial building. I think that's kind of a gimmick there. I don't understand why the county or these committees would want to do that. You know, there are a lot of old barns in the county. Should all of us try to get this kind of a designation now? So that maybe we can put a business in there and do a business in an ag, in an area that is zoned for agriculture. I've lived within a few miles of this location my whole life. But I noticed in the minutes of the one meeting you had when the people that want to develop this were asked if they had contacted the neighbors. The answer is no. I found this out first. I read the notice in the paper that there was going to be a hearing, and I saw it was called the Cooley Homestead. That's new to me. You know, around there long time, I never heard it called that. I don't know who gave it that kind of a name, but I was surprised at that. And I too think that if somebody wants to recommend that they change the zoning and all this, they would certainly want to talk to the neighbors in the neighborhood, and they want to change from agriculture to a commercial operation. I don't think that the people in the community are going to support that. Sure, and my friend Mike, he's a lot bigger than I am, but I will disagree with him. He says that everybody is in favor of doing this and they need this. Well, the thing that I would tell these people to do is if you want to do this business, that's fine, and do good business, but take it to a place that is zoned properly. Don't come in and expect all those of us involved with agriculture, have been there all this time and done this. Do you think we're going to just sit by and allow you to take that away from us? It seems to me like this is sort of a grab for control of agricultural land. Are we in Lancaster County? Are we going to allow this for everybody that comes in and asks for it? I think we're making a mistake. And as far as the landmark thing, I really don't see where that makes much difference. The first material I had from the people that want to do the business here said that they wouldn't use these buildings anyway. They would be on another part of the acreage. And so why would you change and call it a landmark thing if it's really going to be meaningless? There's a windbreak that they say, well, they will shield us from this entertainment or this activity. I think that if people drive by and they want to see these old houses, they won't even know where it is. They'll go across the road where the Camp Creek Thrashers are. And then I'll get to this activity that is planned. The report that I saw said it could have they want permission for up to 300 persons. You know, 300 persons is an awful lot of people. Who's going to control 300 people out in the country? You know, the culture is now that once you get out of the city limits, you're home free. Just come around in the country once and see how much damage we have from people who come out of the city just to dump their garbage or their brush or anything, or to just tear things up. They tear up the road first, and then when that gets boarding, you go on out in the fields and tear around. If there's 300 more people come there, I don't think, then mix that with alcohol, and I would say, we'll probably all say there's going to be alcohol there. That's a pretty poor mixture to have out there in the country in the agriculture area. I'm definitely opposed to the landmark decision, and I'm definitely opposed to bringing a business into agriculture zone land.
Okay? Thank you. Questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Testimony in opposition.
My name is Andrew Stock. I'm the owner of Wayne R. Stock Incorporated. I own the property that borders the south and the east side of this property. And I can honestly say today is the first plan I've ever heard of this before I got this letter in the mail from you guys on this hearing.
Sir, can I get your address, please?
9503 286th Street, Murdoch, Nebraska, 68407.
Thank you.
My family's owned the property for approximately 20 years. We were very good friends with Colonel Dodge, who is partially named on the property. He was a great man. But we've been there a long time. No one has ever reached out to explain this to us. We've been there a long time. Seems like, again, this historical overlay is just a way to get a commercial facility onto a farm. And that concerns me, owning the property on two sides of this. What kind of, you mentioned a buffer because of the historic overlay. There could be an interchange off I-80 there at some point as Waverly and the city grows. If I want to develop my ground, what's going to happen if there is historic overlay and all of a sudden my property value is not development worthy because of their historic overlay. My other concern with this is I do actively farm that property. Farming is not 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. I don't know how many of you would want to have a wedding in a farmyard with a combine blowing dust in the wind out of the south across the farm. If it's a Saturday night at 4 p.m. and we need to spray chemicals on our corn, I don't want any restrictions put on me on how my business is run just so they can run a commercial event center on their farm. I think the paved road is good there, but my concern is the number of people. Just today, this is the first I've heard of it, the city planners, when they were up here, they were talking 200 to 300 people. The property owners, and the last person was talking 300 to 400 people. So we've already jumped from 200 people to 400 people in the last hour on what size this facility is going to accommodate. So, next week, next month, is it going to be a 600-person facility? And where does that traffic go if it's the same weekend as Camp Creek Thrashers events that are already there? Pretty soon you just doubled or tripled the amount of traffic in that 1 mile stretch with two facilities and two events going on at the same time. I guess my main concern, like I said, is for the agricultural part. It is a rural area. The Camp Creek Event Center across the road is not much of a concern because that is agricultural driven. Most of the events there are geared towards ag. The attending people there are from the ag community, and if there's dust If there's noise, they understand the business, but if there's city people having a country wedding, they are not going to understand why we're out there making noise and dust during their perfect day. And I just don't think it's probably the right setting. I agree Waverly could use a facility like that, but I think maybe on the edge of town or in town would be a much better place for such a facility. And I guess I don't see that it's going to gain them any bigger facility. They already said they had a center in town that could host 200 to 300 people. So if we're building another 200 to 300 person facility, it's not really gaining the city of Waverly a bigger reception hall. So
I think, I'm not sure if the map is still up there on the projector.
it's not, and I didn't.
Steve,
bring
can
one,
you
I
bring one up?
apologize.
I want you to point out where your property is in
Absolutely.
relation to this one.
So this is their 17-acre parcel right here. I own along Bluff Road to the interstate, up here to this corner. So I border the south and the east side.
So can you tell me a little bit, when Camp Creek Threshers are having events, how that affects Bluff Road, and what kind of thing, do you have to, are you a respectful neighbor and don't take the combine out during, or the tractors out during that time, or you just operate as normal?
We just operate as normal.
And does Camp Creek Threshers interfere with your normal operations when they have their events?
No. But typically, those are going to be an event during the daytime, during normal working hours, and
Do you mean Monday through Friday?
well, or a Saturday afternoon. They're not a 5 p.m. to midnight event. Typically by sundown, the traffic's leaving, and they're pretty much out of there. And I'm not there a lot because it's just an active farm.
Mm-hmm.
So we are there and we do our work and we leave.
Do you operate a lot at night?
At times.
I
certain
suppose
times of
during the
year.
busy season,
Yep.
but
Spring, summer, and fall. Yep. And that's one of my concerns with the wedding season, or the event season, is going to be April, May, June, during the busiest time of the year when we're there, and it's going to be September, October, November in the fall.
Mhm.
So
Thank you.
Other questions?
No.
Thank you.
I'm Marlon Johnson, 5218 North 202nd Street, Alvo, Nebraska. I and my wife own property within, one property is about 140 acres that's within just a long quarter mile to the east, northeast of this place. Another one is 100 acres, roughly a mile and a half to the east. The one that's 100 acres to the east on 190th and Bluff Road, if you're aware, is a T intersection. And many times I'll have people traveling eastbound down Bluff Road, not realizing that it is a T intersection, and they plow right into my field that's at the top of the T. The reason I think that's important is because I'm not naive enough to think that there isn't going to be alcohol involved in some form at these functions, whether it's sold there or somebody brings it in. And we all know that if people are going to drive after they've had alcohol, much more inclined to go the county roads versus the pavement back to Waverly. And I just think that condition of the road handles a lot of traffic anyway, but it doesn't need that kind of traffic. In addition, I see a lot of people going up and down Bluff Road, and as a farmer, We are always trying to be very careful with our machinery. I mean, we'll take heads off the combine, but the combines anymore are 18-foot wide just with the wheels. Your roads are 24-foot wide, edge to edge. It doesn't give us a lot of opportunity. We're as safe as we can, but we've all heard farm vehicle accidents, you know, on better highways than this, and this problem is going to continue. So I've got a real problem if the additional traffic that would be encountered there, not only in terms of our farm equipment, but semis going on Bluff Road during harvest and planting and spring season. I concur a lot with Mr. Stock's comments. You know, he told it really the way it is on that. So, and I too received a letter from the Planning Commission here of a zoning change, was not contacted by anybody in regard, didn't even know this was going to happen until I received the letter. And as I look at the numbers, I was told that there potentially, but they didn't know for sure, was going to be a 40 by 80 building with upwards of 300 people there. Well, I seriously doubt if the state fire marshal would approve 300 people to be in a 40 by 80 building. I mean, that's just overcrowded. So major concern there. I was also told that there's potentially 45 events in the course of a year. That's just, I mean, I don't see that the Lancaster County deputy sheriffs have the manpower to keep up with something like that. You know, we all start out with good intentions, but at what point do a few things go wrong and then we're in a monumental position that, you know, we either got to hire more law enforcement or, you know, maybe they have to provide their own law enforcement on the premise with it. So the point of they had hoped to do it with just family workers, you know, that's great on a smaller crowd. I have no problem with that whatsoever, but on large crowds, I just don't see that as really being a workable situation. I mean, you can try, but at what point does it go wrong? You know, and then how do you recover from it? I've been told in some situations that, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. That's not the way to plan out something of this magnitude. And I agree, Waverly may need some additional meeting and event space, but I think it's a much better solution to put something like this in the city of Waverly. And if there's sales at this place for whatever function, let Waverly partake in the sales tax revenue from it. I mean, this could be a win-win situation really for Waverly if it's located right close or within the city limits of Waverly. But to be out in that area with so many unknown factors, it's just would be terrifically hard for me to support anything like that. And for that reason, because there isn't enough known about it, I would urge you to not approve actually both of these permits. You know, when I looked at the pictures today of the place, and I've farmed all my life. I'm 62 years old now. Been around went to Waverly School, graduated from there, saw a lot of buildings. I didn't see anything unique about that place. It's not a Sears Roebuck home. I mean, what really substantiates it other than the age? You know, a lot of old chicken houses around that got a coat of paint on, look good, but what are they used for? You know, in a machine shed, yeah, there's a lot of those, but there's nothing unique to the structure of that you can't find somewhere else within Lancaster County or surrounding counties. So I'm opposed to actually both of the permitting process, or I mean the permits to that. I would entertain any questions if you have any.
Can you show me, I'm pretty clear on where your one property is that tees, but can you show me your other sections that you, on the map there?
From Camp Creek Threshers, I'm just across the road to the east.
Can you maybe point it out on that
Oh,
map for me?
I'm sorry, sure.
I think I know what you're talking about, but
This is Camp Creek Threshers here. My property is in this area here. And then if Bluff Road went clear over here,
Oh, hold on a
this is the
second.
T
He's gonna zoom it out a little bit so we can see better. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Yeah, as I was saying, this property right here is the 145 acres that I have. And if Bluff Road continued to the east and a mile, I'll get it over there. This is where that T intersection is. 2 to 5 times a year, I'll have a vehicle that will just totally miss the intersection and just plow right out into my field. A year ago, actually about now, there was a motorcyclist that did not make the turn and ended up being catapulted up into my field, and I believe he was hauled away in a rescue squad. He survived, but it was an injury.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Thank you.
I am Mary Johnson. Yeah, I'm married to him. But I live on 17705 Bluff Road. And if you look, it's this place right here. It's a place that has all the white fencing around it. We purchased it from Dr. Ted and Alice Doan in 2017. And we're currently remodeling this house. I did call Carol because I wanted more answers to the questions that I had. Because the first I heard about it was the letter. And my husband handed me the letter and said, hey, you need to look at this. So I called Carol yesterday, and some of the information that he was giving you was information that Carol had given me. We're looking at maybe 45 venues through the year, about 300 people. And I said, what are we going to do about security? Well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Well, I think we all need more information if we're going to proceed with this, number one, because as a person who installed an $8,500 security system on one place, and it's a 1917 Sears and Roebuck home that my brother had, I'll probably have to install a security system on a couple other places that we have too, because of the increase in traffic. And we get a lot of traffic on that gravel road. Don't kid yourself. That gravel road is a main drive from Murdoch, Nebraska, or from the eastern, or from Cass County over to Waverly. It's kind of a shortcut. There's a lot of joggers on that road. There's a lot of bicyclists on that road. And I said to my husband, after living over at 202nd Street, there is a lot of traffic on this road that goes very, very fast. So I think that there is that issue, and that pavement is 55 mile an hour. Is it going to be necessary to put more signs there to tell people to slow down? Venue Event Center here. What happened to using the Lancaster Event Center? It was not so long ago that the Lancaster Event Center was saying not enough people were using that venue. You can use it for weddings. You can rent it for about anything. And we have Deer Springs Winery at 176th and Adams Street. And that's another venue they can use for weddings or for parties and things like that. The other thing I had a question about was, of course, the alcohol, because whenever there's alcohol and there's people drinking, it's usually not a good combination out in the country. And I say that because the piece of property that Marlon Johnson showed you that we own right across from Camp Creek Thrashers, right on the east side, we have had people swing into our property and take naps. Seriously. To sleep it off or whatever. And then you find them and you try to push them on their way. So what's to stop that from happening? You know, and the thing is, the more land you have, the more exposure you have. I understand that. I get that. Okay, and so we do have a lot of exposure, so consequently we carry a lot of insurance. But 176th Street, people not knowing that that bridge is out, and to take a shortcut, they'll go down 176th Street, then they'll be lost, because that's on the east side of this Dodge property. And it has been closed for a long time. Even I catch myself doing it once in a while. Oh, I'll take the shortcut. Well, guess what? The bridge is out. So that's a problem also. Harvest and planting season are high volume seasons for semis on that road. We get semis, we get rock trucks. The other thing I guess I'm looking at is, as far as security, the deputy sheriffs, are they going to pay for additional security, or are the taxpayers going to carry that load? Because when you have big events with 300 people, don't you need security there? Don't you need a presence? And especially if you have alcohol? I think you do need a presence there. I work for Syngenta. When we have a big event, we have to have security there. We have to hire security there. And when I had an event here in downtown Lincoln, Tom Cassidy was there. So that's some of the things we also need to look at. You know, I'm not saying I'm totally against it, but what I'm saying is I think we all need information in writing as far as what's going to happen versus just, hey, we'll deal with that when it comes up. Any questions at all?
What's it like when Camp Creek Threshers are having an event there?
Pardon?
What is it like when Camp Creek Threshers are having?
Actually, it's very quiet because Camp Creek has it very, very well organized. Plus, they don't have alcohol. You know, they don't have alcohol. When they have their train deal, it's not a lot of people there. When they have their flea market, they have the area where the flea market vendors are at, and you have the parking lot maybe 1/3, maybe half full. I was over there for their flea market. When they have their thrashing thing, it's very well organized as far as the traffic pattern going in and out. You know, initially when they started up, it wasn't that organized, back in 1977 or whenever it was, because I've been going to that thing ever since I was in college. So, you know, they've got it down to a, you know, an art, so to speak.
Anything else? Questions? No. Thank you. Testimony in opposition.
My name is Mary Alice Johnson. I live at 11651 North 176th Street, which is about a half a mile north of this proposed event center. I've lived on this farm, my husband and I have lived on this farm for 41 years. We've worked very, very hard to live on a farm to have peace and quiet. So I have experience with Camp Creek Threshers. My father-in-law was one of the founding members. And believe me, people go down 176th Street. So, I don't know, can I get the map up? My farm isn't included on the map anyways, but if you know what 176th Street is, that's a gravel road, and...
The map's up now.
Okay, but yeah, we're not on there, but, yeah, we're not on the map. But in my 41 years out there, I can't tell you what people do out there. You know, and especially alcohol is involved. I have found used syringes out there, a bag of dead puppies. I mean, people come out there just to, I don't know, do what? And yeah, 200, 300 people is going to affect us. And the noise level I'm concerned about, because we can hear the interstate, especially in the summertime. We like to spend outdoors, and especially at night, sit on our porch and enjoy the evening. And the noise level will impact us, definitely. And I just don't like, we have enough traffic with Camp Creek, and people do take that gravel road. Now, since the traffic has kind of eased up since Bluff Road has been paved, so that's a good thing, but still people take it to dump their trash. You know, I spend every spring picking up trash on our road, and none of the Camp Creek people will pick up trash, you know. So I just don't want more traffic. If Waverly wants an event center, they should build it in Waverly. Empire Fencing is building a facility right now. They're going to have batting cages and all that. I'm sure that would be open to parties. Probably not weddings or anything like that, but, you know, birthday parties, stuff like that. Waverly needs to build their own event center. We don't need to be responsible to entertain Waverly's people or Lancaster County's people. I'm sorry, but it's an emotional thing. We moved out to the country for peace and quiet, and I'm afraid we won't have it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Thank you.
Testimony in opposition. Okay. We will move to staff questions. I have a question.
You know I do.
Steve, can you briefly summarize if this were to go forward today with approval of the motions on that we'll consider, what additional, what's the process from that point look to actually get to a point where events are being held on this property? There's additional permits, there's additional reviews. Can you go through that?
Sure. So specifically, the site plan has to be revised because it was a very general site plan. You need to have an actual building elevation and actual parking. So there would be additional review with the planning department and also Historic Preservation Commission reviewing what the building looks like. Then there would be your normal review with building and safety in terms of the building itself and exiting and all the rest of those type of things. The special permit does not get into operation aspects of it. So we don't have any special permit that requires you show us a security plan and how many security guards and things like that you're having. Certainly those type of things in terms of if this is going to be operated with SDLs and individual operators going to come out. Certainly if you start to see a track record, that might be something that could be taken into account. Track record of problems, I'm saying, that might be part of the alcohol application process in the long term. So certainly any special permit, the county board would have the possibility of revoking a special permit if there's a documented series of problems. That would have to go to traffic, accidents, noise, all of those type of things, not following the alcohol rules, that type of thing as well. So in general, that's the application that would continue if it was approved by the county board. One thing is, currently it is not set up with a limit on the number of people going to the facility. And so if ultimately the Planning Commission wanted to recommend or the county board adopt some type of limit on the number of persons, that would be one aspect if you thought, well, you want to start it with that 400 or 500 or whatever that number would be. But as currently drafted, it is simply a special permit that allows, as part of the historic preservation, for them to operate an event facility on the site.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, I might have missed it, but do they have to get a special designated license to serve alcohol at these events?
So some of the event centers have done that each wedding then goes to its own vendor, so to speak, and then that vendor comes in for the SDL for the site.
They have it themselves.
Yes, and particularly, I mean, it is up to how they're going to operate, but in your first year when maybe you only have 15 or 16 events, maybe you would look at it that way. Maybe not all of them are going to have alcohol anyhow, so you go that route versus having your own license, so to speak.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yep. I didn't see anything in the report about county engineer weighing in on roads and that kind of stuff. Were they concerned about traffic volume or anything like that?
I believe it was routed to them, and we don't have any comments from them about the application. So typically, if they were concerned about access or anything, we would get a comment from them on that.
Sure. If we wanted to put signage on Bluff Road, for example, I know we've seen previous applications similar to this one out in the country, where the county engineer was concerned about traffic and they suggested putting signs out. What if the property owner wanted to put signs out even though the county engineer doesn't have that recommendation? Is that something they could do? I'm thinking about something like slow farming equipment or Interstate I-80 with a big arrow pointing the right way. Is that something they could do? Would it have to be only on their property?
Well, any sign permits is another requirement that it goes back through the planning department. They'd be allowed to have a sign, and of course it would make sense. Any operator would want to have a sign that makes it clear the name of the company or the name of the event center and turn here, that type of thing. You're right, we did have the one historic preservation special permit that included an event facility, the Bruce Stewart application, where they had moved on a historic house out of the city, actually, into the county, and then used the barn as part of their events. That's the only one I'm aware of that the county engineer did require some type of a signage. The one out on the Hillside Event Center, the county engineer did not require any particular signage on that one.
I think that's it for staff.
Christie, and then Dean, and then Tracy.
I might have missed this also, but do you have to have the historic designation for the event center?
No, there is a separate special permit, which is an expanded home occupation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that might have been a fit. You might have necessarily had to ask for, though, a waiver if you're saying, well, if you're going to have 8 events every month, and every month, you're going to have 9 employees there, is that the equivalent of 4 full-time employees, so to speak? Because there's a limit of no more than 2 employees on, 2 persons, not employees. We changed that because that was confusing.
Mm-hmm.
2 persons engaged in the occupation on the site who do not live on the site. So you can have any number of children or family members who live on the site engaged in the home occupation. But other people who are engaged in the occupation, in other words, setting up the chairs or serving the alcohol or that type of thing, we do not include in the expanded home occupation deliveries. So somebody comes and delivers the cake and leaves, and somebody comes and delivers the flowers and leaves. That as a delivery, they're not really engaged in the occupation. The people who come and serve food for 5 hours, they're considered engaged. Music, they're considered engaged in the occupation.
So that type of opportunity would really would be a limiting factor in terms of the types of events or the kinds of things you could have
Yes, for the expanded home
location.
occupation, you would probably ultimately have some type of a limit on the number of events. Under the historic preservation special permit as currently drafted, there isn't any number of limit on the events. There certainly as an event facility, you're primarily getting your events on Fridays and Saturdays, but if somebody wanted to have a Wednesday football viewing party there, you can certainly do that. There isn't any restriction currently built into it.
Dean?
Stacy, there were a couple of questions about whether this really was a historic landmark, and I'm assuming since it went through Ed's eyes, I can't think of a better preservation person than Ed Zimmer, and the commission, that you are perfectly comfortable that this does meet the requirements of being a historical landmark.
Yes, it does. I can expand on that just a little bit.
Okay.
There are 3 reasons you can designate a property as a landmark. One is based on people or events. One is for its architecture, and one's for archaeology. This one is being designated for people and events, namely for the Cooley family, being prominent citizens in Waverly and contributing to the agricultural economy. It's also a typical example of what a farmstead would have looked like in the early 20th century, and it is very well intact. All of the buildings mostly still there, well preserved and maintained.
Thank you.
Stacy, if someone else wanted to come along, my in-laws have a farm out in, well, it's not in the county, but it's close to it. If they wanted to get a historic landmark designation, is there anything stopping them from doing that?
Not necessarily.
As long as it met the qualifications?
Yes, if it meets the criteria, it could be designated.
Really, they just have to put forth the money and have the historical significance.
Sure, yes.
Let me just clarify that. So without the historic landmark overlay, the special permit as presented would not be allowed on this site.
Correct. If the local landmark designation were denied, the county board could not approve the special permit for historic preservation.
And that's because we're in an agricultural zoning district, and that would have had been seen as not compatible with traditional uses of agricultural land.
Well, it's that the special permit is specifically for historic preservation.
Okay.
That's actually what the special permit is for. As part of preserving a designated local landmark, you're allowed to have additional uses that you may not otherwise have had in the AG. You can also have uses that are allowed in the AG, which in this case, you could have an event facility as an expanded home occupation. It might have had different conditions than the ones as presented.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Steve, can you go into, we're using the term event center here, but can you explain the difference between like the Lancaster County Event Center and this as an event center?
Sure. Mostly it's a matter of scale. The event center no longer is looking for things to do on the weekend. When we've talked with their executive director, they are bustling every single weekend, almost every single day. And so, particularly with the high school rodeo, it is now quite a popular event center. And they're now very much looking on a much larger scale in terms of shows and things, the smaller weddings, family parties, reunions. I'm not saying that they would turn them down. I'm just saying the scale of the facility now is so much larger with animal buildings and that type of thing that it's really, what we're seeing is there is still a calling for these smaller venues, both in the city and in the county as well.
So really, to a person that's not familiar with our planning language, even though we're calling this an event center, it really, to the common non-planner person, this is more of a reception hall type of thing.
Correct, that would be.
They're not planning on building a Lancaster County Event Center.
Yeah, we use the term event rather than reception hall because they can have other kind of events than wedding receptions. You can have family reunions, football parties, that type of thing as well.
And numbers of people, occupancy, all of that will be determined based on the further steps that have to take place after the special permit is in place.
Correct. This special permit, why the site plan is not particularly detailed by a lot of our site plan standards, showed a 60 by 100 barn type of building. If they came back in and wanted to do a 50,000 square foot facility, that's not what they had applied for. And so they would have to go back through the process if they said, you know what, we did phase one and now we want to expand to 1,000, have a much bigger building. No, that's not what your application showed. You need to go back through the process. And as a matter of fact, something of that kind of a larger scale, I'm not sure we would think would fit in terms of the setting for this. So we're judging it, while the site plan isn't very detailed, it does include the 60 by 100 barn. That is part of what you are approving is the associated site plan. It will be improved, but it still basically needs to fit in with what they have shown here.
Steve, am I not also correct that the fire marshal would set a limit on since it's a public facility?
Correct. He's going to look at exiting and all the rest of the aspects in terms of what is the occupancy of the building as well.
Right.
Steve, would it be fair to say that it's a pretty normal process for someone? I would say that these applicants seem very proactive and planning oriented. By planning, I mean looking into the future.
Mm-hmm.
To maybe test, I don't want to say test the waters, but they're making sure they have a solid business plan and these things pass before they get into the details. So we're kind of,
Correct.
Making sure that this is going to work before we put a lot of money into it and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, that's very typical of a lot of the permits you see. It's for a 15,000 square foot building, but there's not a lot of details there. Sometimes there's going to be, it's a $2 or $3 million investment, and yes, they have a better site plan to begin with. There's still going to be some changes made later. Here it's a much smaller facility, and before you spend a lot of money on a lot of details, only to have it turned down, there's enough information here, we think, for you to judge the aspect and the impact of it. And particularly, we're looking at the site around it, looking at the road that is paved, where the primary traffic patterns would be from. And so that's what we're using to judge as an appropriate application of the special permit or not.
So really, we're looking at kind of a master plan here, and then once that gets approved, they're gonna come back and fill in some of those details that the neighbors are anxious about.
Correct. And if they were going to even come back and start to use one of the historic buildings, let's say they wanted to start to use the barn for something other than a reception hall, but a use that's not allowed for farming, such, I mean, they can use it for farming, they'd have to come back through the process as well. If they wanted to start a B&B in the house, well, that's no longer part of the special permit, but they could come back through part of the special permit and add that later.
So really, that's kind of a protection for the neighbors.
Yes, that this is now very specific as to what could be done here, versus under AG, you could have added a lot of different buildings on the site without having to go through any particular approval process.
Can you also kind of address, would you call this a commercial building that they want to build on there?
Yes, I mean, it'll certainly have to meet the commercial building codes. We're still looking at the property as a whole, as that overall as a whole, it is still a farm operation, a residential use as a whole. It now has this additional permitted use, which is the event facility, that has been added to it, but it's a rather large site. The majority of the site is still in residential/agricultural use.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Oh, yes, sorry. Can you talk about the right to farm?
Well, in general, I mean, most of Lancaster County, the fact that you farm right next door, even though we allow this special permit, it does not apply restrictions on the farming operation next door. So he has the right to go farm in the middle of the night if he wishes. Certainly there are some restrictions on, how much can your chemicals spray onto somebody else's property, but you have the right to farm. And if these operators came forward and said, "Hey, could you help us stop the person next door from farming?" we would say, "Well, why were you there in the first place?" And no, we're not there. The same with agricultural residential uses. We approve acreage subdivisions, but try to make it clear why you want to live next to the farm environment. That means you have to be a part of the farm environment and realize they have the right to go out and farm and do their uses.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, applicant rebuttal. Anything you want to address or say before we entertain a motion?
I just want to reiterate or emphasize the fact that we do want to be good neighbors. We do want to respect farming, the farmland around us. Anyone that would be planning to get married or have their wedding reception at our property is going to see that there's farmland all around, and that's going to be a common sense type thing. But we'd probably also put that, in our contract with anyone, that if there's noise, that's on them. I can't imagine that what we're doing would interrupt the farmer as far as noise or anything else goes, especially with the interstate noise being right there. The interstate has a lot of impact on the neighborhood, as well as 8,000 people at Camp Creek Thrashers at one event. I can't imagine that.
We'll have that many over a year.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted, thanks for your time and consideration.
And also, I want to say the neighbors that we'd contacted were the neighbors that would be directly affected, not nobody that had farm ground next to us. 'Cause
Would you be willing to, there's going to be some lag time between our decision today and when it goes to county commission. Would you be willing to have a neighborhood meeting so some of these people can come together and voice their concerns to you and maybe find some working, some.
Of course, yeah.
Okay. What about, we heard some concerns about signage. Would you be willing to put up signs, I'm thinking like I-80 this way, or, as you're exiting your driveway type of thing?
Oh, of course, yes.
Can you, I know that the plans are preliminary, but can you kind of reiterate what you're expecting you're going to build for capacity-wise?
maximum of 300 We already met with a fire marshal, talked about it.
299 is.
299.
We have to stay under 300 to avoid sprinklers, I believe.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
good to know. And so that's roughly, I'm assuming that 60 by 100 building that you kind of have on your
It might be a
preliminary.
little bit smaller than that, but that's the largest we'd build.
We plan to have an additional meeting with the fire marshal to make sure before we meet with the architect
Very
that
smart.
we have all of the sizes correct.
Yes. Okay. How long do you think it's going to take you to get through the process and start construction? How long do you think construction's going to take? Basically, what I want to know is how long do you think it's going to be before you're up and operating?
Hopefully next spring is kind of our goal.
That's your target? Okay. Great.
I didn't do that.
Hopefully next spring.
Next spring. So about a year, not
Roughly.
quite.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you. We're ready to entertain a motion.
They have to be two separate motions?
Yes, we need to take each motion separately. So we'll vote, or not vote, but we'll entertain a motion on the change of zone first.
I would move approval of the change of zone.
Second.
Okay?
Campbell.
Seconded, I'm sorry.
Tracy.
Beck-
Cora.
Tracy?
You can pick, there are three of us.
Was it core?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll have discussion then on that motion.
I believe that what Stacy indicated, that this does meet historic designation, and so I see absolutely no reason not to put this property on that classification.
I agree with Dick.
Yeah, it appears to have gone through the processes we have in our place and the vote from our committee that recommends. So,
It may not be an example of any kind of extraordinary architecture. What it is an example of early 20th century farming, which I think is important, especially here, to preserve as well.
Yep, I agree with that. Tracy just made a great point. I think especially in our county, and the fact that we are an urban and rural mix of uses and zones and everything, to be able to do this on this property is really important.
I think a lot of times because we grew up with this, I did anyway, properties like this seem normal, but they really are dwindling, and so we have to take precautions to protect them. And really, this is just an extra layer of protection, so someone can't just come in and bulldoze it. It shouldn't affect, the landmark should not affect, farming operations in any way, I don't believe.
Anybody else? Okay, I think we're ready to vote on that one.
Okay, this would be for the approval of change of zone 19018. Beckius?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Joy?
yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes,
Motion carried, 7-0.
and now we'll entertain a motion on the special permit item.
Move approval, Beckius.
Second, Finnegan.
Discussion?
I think that the proposed special permit here is appropriate in this site with the historic overlay. I think we do have some distance from residences. I think we do have an adequate setup here. The concerns brought forward, and while there were many concerns brought forward on this application, there was also a lot of support brought forward for this application as well. I do want to reiterate, so that it's perfectly clear, at least from my point of view, I won't speak for other commissioners, of course, that I have a full expectation that agricultural use surrounding this property will continue in the exact same fashion, and I encourage that it continues in the exact same fashion that it occurs today. So when we're talking planting, spraying, harvesting, I would encourage you to feel free to do as you do today. I do not anticipate nor would support any limitations, and this application does not do that. It will not do that. I don't think it sets the standard for that either, or that potentially happening down the road, whether it's ag use or even potential development use here as well for the surrounding properties. I do want to reiterate that at least I, as a planning commissioner, have a full expectation that full ag use surrounding this property continues just as it does today.
As I went through all the emails and notes that we got, and compared with the addresses, to the vast majority, the houses closest to this property were supporting it. And it was further out and away that the opposition letters were coming from. So I strongly believe that they have done their due diligence with the homes that are close within that mile radius, that they are aware of it and have gone through the process.
I encourage the applicant to have a neighborhood meeting, and if you need help, the planning staff has a list, that they use to notify these people. They can help you with that. I know there's some concerns from the neighbors about noise and traffic and that kind of stuff, and part of what alleviates my concerns with these people are going to be living right there. So if, they're not going to want the trouble, they're not going to want the brawls or anything else. So that alleviates some of my concerns about those. And I think that they're gonna maintain it just like you would want it maintained if it was your property. I think this is a good, we've seen a lot of these, and this is by far, I think, the most well thought out one that we've seen.
Yeah, I think this proposed use fits on this property. I agree with Tom that my expectation and hope is that the agricultural operations surrounding the property will continue. I think that's part of the beauty of this use on this property. It's part of why I think it will work, actually. I also am impressed that, especially with the mayor's comments, that this will be a great addition to the community. And there were some comments about, well, the city should build a quote-unquote event center to accommodate 300 people. Well, we have a private entrepreneur who's willing to do it. And a private entrepreneur who lives on the property, as Tracy said, that's willing to do it. So I think that's a great thing. I wish we could do more of that, actually, in our communities here in Lancaster County. One other comment, I think Steve addressed this really well. There are a lot of things that need to be figured out yet. And the quote or the saying that we'll cross that road when we get there, that's true. We will cross that road when we get there. There's a lot of reviews and a lot of permitting that needs to occur down the future as detail is added onto this. So I think it's a wonderful proposal, and I'm going to support the motion. I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, this is for the conditional approval of special permit 19033. Beckius?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
We're going to take a 10-minute break. Is that enough?
Plenty,
Okay,
yeah.
we're going to take a 10-minute break and resume at 3 o'clock. Okay, we're going to resume the meeting, so if everyone could have a seat.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is item 4.2, special permit 19030 to allow for a new accessory dwelling unit with waivers to increase the floor area and to have a separate septic system on property generally located at 1400 Northwest 27th Street, or 14,000 North 27th Street. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval. This is final action on this item unless appealed to the city council, or, I'm sorry, is this county? County board, I'm sorry, within 14 days. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this item?
I see none.
Thank you.
Tom.
Tom Chaka, planning staff. This requests special permit for an accessory dwelling unit on a 20-acre piece of property up on Northwest 27th, north of West Mill Road. And right here is the site. Mill Road would be down here, northwest 27th Street. This is Raymond's zoning jurisdiction, so just outside of their zoning jurisdiction. As you may recall, the county recently had amended their zoning regulations to allow accessory dwelling units. It was added to the county's zoning regulations in December of 2018. And just for everybody's definition, an accessory dwelling unit is a self-contained housing unit that is secondary to the main residence. A accessory dwelling unit could either be attached or be included within the principal dwelling. The accessory dwelling unit would have its own kitchen, bathroom, sleeping area, bedroom, and is subordinate in size to the principal dwelling. Just to give you a blow-up of the area of the site. The principal dwelling is located here. The ADU will be located over here with the new septic system for the ADU. Some of the conditions to have an accessory dwelling unit is the lot has to be at least 20 acres in size. This is 20.69 acres. No more than 2 bedrooms are allowed in the ADU. The owner of the lot has to live in either the ADU or the principal dwelling. Must share the same access to the street, which it does. Must be set back either according to the AG district or set back as far as the principal dwelling. As you can see, it's set back quite a bit further. Needs to be within 200 feet of the principal dwelling. There's no dimension on here, but it is within 200 feet. And so the other couple things that they have asked waivers to is that the requirement is that the accessory dwelling unit be no larger than 1,000 square feet or 40% of the principal dwelling. This one, the proposed ADU is 870 square feet, which is under the 1,000 square feet, but is slightly larger than the 40%. It comes out to about 45.5%. So the waiver request rounded that up to 46%. So the waiver would be from 40% to the 46%, but still well under the 1,000 square feet. It's the way the code reads, it's the lesser of 40% or 1,000 square feet. So it's a very slight increase in the overall square footage. The other waiver is to have a separate septic system for the ADU. And this is requested due to the location of the other septic tank or septic system and several, there's an existing underground water line here, and so the location of the existing septic tank and the utility lines, due to the difficulty in that, planning supports the waiver. So, any questions?
Questions?
Yes. Why an ADU? Why not something else on this site? Like, why
You're-
not? I mean, could they split it into, what if they just wanted to put a regular home on here?
They can't.
Why?
The AG district, the minimum lot size for a house is 20 acres. So they would not be able to subdivide this property for another house.
On the site plan, I'm a little confused here, because it says new gravel drive, and then it points to a box that looks like,
That goes into the garage.
okay, well, that's what I wondered.
Yeah,
Is
there's
that
a
the
garage.
garage?
There's a
Yeah.
garage, an existing garage here. The ADU is this penciled
Okay.
one over here.
Okay, and so what is it looks, so that's an existing garage right there?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
and these are the lateral fields, these rectangles.
So they're not building an extra garage next to the existing garage as well?
No,
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, they certainly could do, there's nothing to prohibit that. Anything else?
Okay, anything else? Thanks. Testimony from the applicant.
Hi, my name's Kelly Walling. This is my husband, Wade. My father-in-law, Steve, his father, he currently lives in the primary dwelling. He lost his wife in 2000, has lived there since on his own. He has battled cancer twice, with the most recent being in 2014, which we both helped him through and everything. My husband, Wade, actually moved in about 10 years ago to help with everything, and I moved in after our wedding in 2016, so it has been a few years. I love him, but this
You've got two husbands for the price of
Yeah.
one, is that what you're saying?
Pretty much I said that. This opportunity will allow Steve to live out his retirement in the home that he has been in for 30 years. I don't want to take that away from him. But it will also allow us to be able to grow our family in the future. Believe our request is a good fit for this type of permit as it relates directly to some of the key statements in the comprehensive plan, basically to allow for multiple generations of our family to still be able to live on the same property, and to utilize a more cost-effective option. Building a whole new 2,000 square foot house on another property far away just doesn't really work for our situation with his father, so that's it.
Questions?
Did I understand that your father would move into the dwelling unit? He'll still stay in his house?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's completely remodeled it,
Worked
made
hard
it
for it.
his,
Okay.
so we don't want to take that away from him, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have testimony in support of this item? Do we have testimony in opposition of this item? Do we have any other staff questions?
No.
Yes or no?
I don't know. No, I guess not.
Okay. I don't suppose there's applicant rebuttal since you were just here, so we will entertain a motion.
Move approval, Beckius.
Second.
Joy.
Discussion.
So initially, I was really excited to see our first ADU application, and it's too bad that it's just one time after Maya's gone, because I know she was on the committee with me. I am concerned that this is exceeding that 40%, and so, and it's nothing against you guys. Because when I'm looking at the plan and the size of the dimensions and stuff that they have drawn out, and I'm thinking of my own house, which is 1,300 square feet, it's bigger than a lot of the rooms that I have. And so then that makes me wonder, well, does it really need to exceed the 40%? I mean, granted, so I kind of have, what I'm taking issue with is this statement in the, I think it's in the applicant letter here. Hold on a second, I'm scrolling. The Census Bureau reporting that the average home built in the Midwest was an average of 2,446 square feet, and they're using that as justification for the 45%. I think that's really large. I mean, like I said, my house is 1,300 square feet. I think we're more in 1,000 to 2,000, and so when we're talking about 40%, I don't think that, I mean, they're making the argument that the principal dwelling is 1,907. I think that is the average, and so I would really like to hold this to that 40%. And the reason why is because when we went through all these ADU meetings, this is what I was exactly afraid of, all these special situations coming in and, oh, we need to waiver this, waiver that, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I know that's why we have this process, but I wanted to get this on the record, that this makes me really hesitant. I would be more comfortable if we said, you know, I'm fine, I understand why they can't share the utilities, and I'm okay with that waiver, but I'm nervous when we're starting to bump it up to 46%. And I know that that sounds so minimal right now, but I know.
Dennis?
Oh.
We have several accessory dwelling units in Village Gardens, and the only limit we placed on them was 1,000 square feet. And we've got some that are, as part of the residence, we've got some that are attached over garages, all kinds of things like that. I really think the county's rule should have been just 1,000 square feet. And I would vote in favor of granting that waiver for them, because they're still under that.
And I like that perspective, because this is on a, 20-acre lot. It's different, a little bit different in the county than it is in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Christie.
And I did sit on the county ADU, and I know we wrestled a lot with this, and the and the or definition. From the discussions that I recall and looking back at my meeting notes, I'm in favor of supporting the less than 1,000 with the concept that we have the option as a special permit to look at that, because we can see how big the existing house is, what their property is like, how they're going to situate it, and we can provide guidance from the analysis we did as a committee and as a recommendation. And so there were stipulations that we did not allow waivers on, and they're meeting those. So I will be in support of this.
Tracy?
I think that I have no concerns, given that it's under the 1,000 square foot, and given the fact that it's also in the ag district. I think that that makes a difference for me as well.
And I will just say, I think this application, even though it may have a couple of waivers, and I appreciate the ability to waive those and be a little flexible, actually really hits the bullseye, I think, in what a lot of people were trying to achieve when talking about accessory dwelling units, especially when we talk about aging in place, multiple generations on a homestead, et cetera. So
Exactly.
I'll be supporting the motion.
I agree.
So now do you see why I was like, I don't
Yeah,
really have questions,
I know.
but, so thank you, fellow commissioners, for talking me through this.
Yeah, I agree with the comments Tom just said. This is a perfect application of this, and I'm going to support it fully. I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, this is for the conditional approval of special permit 19030. Beckius?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Okay, next item. It's item 4.3, special permit 19032 to allow for soil excavation on property generally located at North 112th Street and Havelock Avenue. This is final action on this item unless appealed to the city council within 14 days. Staff recommendation is conditional approval. Are there any ex parte communications?
Yes, I had a text from Tim Becker last night. saying he had concerns about this project, but he would be here today, and he still is here today, so we'll all hear his concerns.
Anybody else? Okay, that's it.
Tom Chaka, planning staff. Application for a special permit for soil excavation on a property that's 105 acres. Within that area, the area of excavation is approximately 55 acres. The applicant's letter states that they would be removing approximately 800,000 cubic yards of soil over the next 3 years. And there are, let me back up. So here, Havelock Avenue on the north, Adams down here off the picture, and 112th Street here. This is the area of the excavation area. Now let me, that's, so here is the site plan. Roughly this outline is what they're showing as the excavation area, although this will have to be revised and pulled back some because there is a requirement that you cannot excavate within 1,000 feet of a private well unless you've done a groundwater report. They have chosen to not do the groundwater report, and so they will be revising this, so this will be pulled back somewhat to meet that 1,000 foot. There's 3 private wells within 1,000 feet of this area of excavation. Current site plan shows 2 accesses, one off of 112th, I think it's here, and then.
Well, can you?
Oops. Okay, there we go. Thank you. One off 112th and another one. It's right here off of Havelock. And so application talks about operating hours shall be limited to daylight hours Monday through Saturday. The applicant has estimated truck traffic at 6 to 7 trucks per hour. Some days could be as up to 10 trucks per hour on certain days. County engineer is requiring a road maintenance agreement with the applicant. And so, and of course, one of the requirements is that they control dust on site. And I haven't seen the road maintenance agreement, but typically in the road maintenance agreement, the county engineer also requires them to control dust on the adjacent roads. Any questions?
Questions? Dean?
Tom, is the up to 10 trucks an hour, is that typical for the other ones we've seen, or is that heavier?
I'm not sure of that. Maybe the applicant. I know the applicant has other soil excavation areas, so might be able to address that.
All right.
We received a letter in opposition that talked about the proximity of the site to the Prairie Pines Nature Preserve. Can you show us generally where that location is?
It's just south.
South.
You can see the wind
This
blows.
is Prairie Pines
Yeah.
right
Okay,
here.
so it's that close. Okay. Thank you.
Do you know if any communication took place between Prairie Pines and the applicant?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Did any communication take place between Prairie Pines and the applicant?
I'm not aware. You'll have to ask the applicant.
Okay.
And Tom, I'm sorry, did I interrupt you? No mention of it in the report. I'm assuming that there is no concern from staff in regards to this excavation project and the proximity to?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Tom, so it might have been late at night when I was reading this, so maybe I missed something, but, and Mike's gonna love this comment. Normally when we see these, they're on consent. What am I missing that, I mean, is it because I know now we have some opposition, but am I missing something that it wasn't on consent in the first place?
No, before this had gotten scheduled, I'd already received a call in opposition, so.
Okay, that's what I wondered. Thank you.
Anything else? Dick, did you have a hand up? I think thanks, Tom. I think we're done with questions for now. We're ready for testimony from the applicant. Mike?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mike Eckert with Civil Design Group, here today on behalf of Oak Valley Development LLC. Tom did a good job summarizing everything, and so I'd just like to update things a little bit more since the application. There's been several items kind of in flux, and so I want to put up this exhibit that shows the area a little better. So we've got Havelock here on the north, and then this is 112th Street on this side of the property. And so, we decided to, in the interest of keeping things going, we hadn't done the hydrology study, and this area was huge. So with that, we said, let's just keep this on schedule, and we'll establish the 1,000-foot radius from the wells. If we want to do the study later and amend it, we'd have to go back through the planning department. We'll do that. So these green circles now indicate a registered well that's here, a registered well that's here, and there's a well. We know there's a house there, so there's a well here, but it's not a registered well, so we did our best job to establish where that 1,000-foot radius was. So we will revise the limits of grading to remove any of these areas inside these circles, so we'll be limited really to the center of the property.
What do you think that reduces your total amount?
Probably not quite half,
Okay.
Dennis. There were some pretty big cuts estimated over here, but our other big area of cuts are here.
Mhm.
And so I think that's going to help. And then additionally, staff has requested a 300-foot buffer to residences. So even if we did the well study someday from that residence and this residence, we'd have to maintain a 300-yard buffer. I did speak with a lady whose house is off the property, is east of this house, but she also owns this land down here, and she had some concerns about if we would be grading, and because our survey ended up indicating that her fence was actually on our client's property, and I said no. I told her about the well situation, and at this point, and this is, I believe this is her property right here, and here, and here. But I assured her that our limits of grading would have to get changed, and even if it didn't, we wouldn't take down the fence because good fences make good neighbors, and you just leave it as is. So, and then secondly, we did speak with the folks from Prairie Pines, is that right? Mm-hmm. Prairie Pines. And they had their concerns about traffic, which I thought was interesting since they had an application from you today to increase traffic. But, and then I know that Mr. Cole, I hadn't talked to him till today, but I know Tom had talked to him. And so what we worked out is that we're going to, because I talked with, so Gaina Construction will be the one operating this permit exclusively, which is always a good arrangement. That way you don't have multiple people going in and out. Everything's got to go through Gaina. It's the way we operated what we call the North Bluff mining permit on North 56 and I-80. They felt like their primary route is going to be along Havelock, and so we have agreed to remove our entry on 112th Street. So we'll really direct them to the Havelock entrance primarily. And I think that's probably the number one concern you're going to hear from the neighbors is traffic. And so I wanted to put up this exhibit that showed the site, and you can see where 84th Street is and 148th Street. And then you've got O Street to the south, and then Cornhusker Highway to the north. And so, and the dash line there is Havelock. And so, be it good or bad, you know, the people on Havelock probably don't want to hear this, but they really feel like their primary route is going to be from 84th Street to the site, probably back to 84th Street or 148th, depending on where their trucks are coming from. If there was a need further south, for references to the Waterford development and the Dominion developments right there, those sites are graded out, balanced, you know, but if there was a need for dirt, they may take 112th Street. You know, these are all county roads. They are going to sign a county maintenance agreement. It gives the county a little bit more teeth in terms of watering for the roads. Not on-site, the soil mining permit talks about containing dust in the pit, and but off-site, the county maintenance agreement on the road allows the county to say, hey, we're getting dust complaints. You need to go and water Havelock. You need to water 112th Street. So I think those are all beneficial things. I mean, I think really the mining permits are somewhat unique. I think they're the only special permit you can get that expires after 3 years. It also has a provision that building and safety can do an annual inspection and deal with issues. So there's lots of controls on this permit, and it will officially expire in 3 years. And we have to come back before this body to get it renewed. So there's some watchdogging going on. And I think the other thing is the traffic. So when we say 800,000 yards, we list that as the maximum, that if we were to grade it down, and our average, this side on average, we will probably do between 6 and 10 foot cuts, and that's it. That's a couple lifts, what we call lifts going down, and that'll be it, and then they'll restore the black dirt. As you also know in mining permits, we can only have 20 acres open at a time for active work. And so, like I said, let's see, we went through our second renewal on the North Bluff permit up at North 56 and I-80. And we have since closed that out. It's officially closed. That's kind of part of the need here, is there's another need for a pit up north. But we've closed that out because of an issue that's going to be before you in a couple weeks. And so, but I can't remember the exact numbers we had on that one. It was probably close to 800,000, but I think over the 6 years of it, we only maybe removed 300,000 to 400,000. And so when Tom asked for the traffic numbers, and I went to Jake Whitefoot at Gaina and emailed him and said, what do you think? And he said, on the busiest days, it would be that, you know, probably about as much as they can load is 10 trucks per hour. But then what happens, and what's happened at North Bluff, is they could go 2-3 weeks and there's not a truck that comes in and out of the site. It all depends on use. At North Bluff, there was a lot of use for Innovation Campus. They required a lot of the lean clays instead of the fat clays that won't shrink and swell. I think geotech engineering over the years has learned that your soils under your building, if they shrink and swell, you're going to have a lot of problems. And that's what drives a lot of this dirt movement, is the specifications for buildings construction. So, so I want to give this point of reference. If we were able to do 100,000 yards a year in this permit, and each one of their trucks can do about 20 yards, and if that was happening on a daily basis, that would be 19 trucks a day. You know, if it was consistent, spread out like that over the course of the year, you know, they would average. I don't know if we'll do 100,000 yards a year out of this pit or not. It is really, again, based on demand. Most of the Innovation Campus need is done, and so these are usually more local buildings. And there's other ones around the county that suffice those geographic areas. And so, you know, I'd say realistically, that is probably going to be in the neighborhood of 30 to 50,000 yards a year, which would, you know, translate into probably less than 10 trucks a day on average. Now, yes, during some peak times that would get consolidated. But so I just wanted to highlight some routing, highlight how much actual use is predicted. The teeth that the permit has, the teeth that the building and safety inspections have, and the teeth that the county road agreement have on the permit. And then, like I said, wanted to highlight that there will be an exclusive operator that's running this, which we found was a big benefit at North Bluff. We started up there with one that was just, they came through our office. And we need 10,000 yards, we need 20,000 yards, and the site just kind of became a disaster. And so, so with that, we feel like this thing will be well managed. Yes,
You said 10 trucks a day, but in our information, it says up to 10 trucks per hour.
Right. So when they're actively hauling and they have an expedient job they need to get done, what Gaina has told us is that's the most trucks per hour they could generally load. So there will be times, yes, when it may be 10 trucks an hour. You know, and so in an 8-hour day, that's 80 trucks. And I guess it's been interesting today sitting and listening at the other applications and the amount of traffic, you know, and these are trucks. They're obviously bigger, but I think the way that a lot of the trucking companies, I think, look at this in their use of the public roads is that they pay a phenomenal amount of wheel taxes and other load taxes to the state, much of which comes back to the county for maintenance of those roads. So,
So when they leave and go to 84th Street, do they turn north or south?
It just depends on where they're taking the dirt. You know.
84th is kind of an iffy road to begin with, yeah.
You know, it's it is somewhat of a necessary evil, if you will, like I said, in terms of we need to get quality dirt. We live in, most of the soils in this county are very high clay content. And the borings have been done on this, and it does have very good lean clays. And so, but they inevitably, you know, when the Cornhusker Bank building was built at 84th, I know a lot of dirt moving in and out of that site. It's just kind of the way it has to happen. And yes, it has an impact on the roads, but those trucks are, by some state formula, theoretically compensating for that damage through the fees that they pay to operate those trucks and the tonnage on them. So, and these sites aren't always necessarily easy to find. You have to have a landowner that's willing to do it. You know, I know that companies like Gaina do go out and try to find pieces, and a lot of times it's farmers are like, no, I'm farming this, I don't want to mine it. But we've had successful restoration standards out at the other pit, the North Bluff pit, where you go through a process of the soils can get compacted and you scarify them about 18 inches deep, and then you spread your topsoil, replant it. As we move that 20-acre piece around up there, that generally by the second and then into the third year, the yields for the farmer were back to normal, that the crops had the root zone had built back up. So, you know, I think staff has come a long way on a mining permit and the things that we have to do like that versus 10 years ago. They were very limited, and there were some bad apples out there that happened. So I think there's a lot of provisions in place and to keep this operating in a proper way. And so I'd be happy to answer questions now or later. I do believe we have some of the neighbors here to talk. So.
I had a couple questions about the dirt itself, and you answered one. I was going to ask you what the soil profile indicates. So it is lean clay.
Yes.
Which is, every building specification requires that you have lean clay for.
Yeah, and several feet of it on most of the site.
Exactly.
So, yeah, a lot of things around this Stevens Creek Basin, as long as they aren't in the bottom part of the basin, seem to be pretty good.
And then the other question is, the drawing that you submitted, if I remember right, did say that you would strip the topsoil and then reuse the topsoil, redistribute the topsoil when you're finished with the mining operation. So the topsoil is not leaving the site.
No.
Or the.
Yeah. So the area that will open up, the topsoil is stockpiled. And then as we transition our 20-acre area, in fact, there's also a provision in there, Dennis, that says that for that area we abandoned, we have 9 months to get the topsoil spread and get it revegetated. So because it's a 3-year permit, we could go 20 acres, 20 acres, 20 acres, and you have 60 barren acres sitting out there. But there's an extra provision that says within 9 months you have to do that, and Building and Safety would see that on their inspection. So.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else with questions for Mike at this time?
No.
Thanks, Mike. We'll take testimony in support for this item. And we will move to testimony in opposition for this item.
Nancy Olofsson, 12101 Havelock Avenue. And I'm the one that Mike talked to earlier. So you already know I'm on the east side of the property. And then my concern was about the barbed wire fence that it's been over there 40 years. And I've maintained it around the property. And in the past and in the future, I will have cattle on the stock ground for several months after their crop is harvested in the fall. I do not want the fence removed, and it has become the property line by adverse possession. And as far as the wells, I'm glad to see that he investigated further on that, but he might have one more well that Dan Finke, I don't know if it's going to overlap. Could we bring up the map of the wells area?
When they come up.
So Dan Finke lives up over here, so it may not overlap, and it may. But my little bit of concern is this the driveway that you propose? So if this ground is not to be disturbed, will you still use that driveway? Or does it move down the hill? And if it moves down the hill, then you might have a little bit more concern about motorists seeing trucks pulling out onto Havelock. That, you know, I can see that because this is the low spot of the property.
We'll ask him that question when he comes up again.
Okay. Weed control, they've seeded it. I think it's alfalfa or sweet corn, I'm not sure which. But the weeds are coming up, and they need to be mowed. And I'm sure they'll probably maintain that, but that is a concern. And my other thinking is that Oak Valley purchased the property to build houses on, and then they found out that it's zoned and that you needed 20 acres to build a home. And so therefore, they could only build 5 or 6 homes on it. And the property is not connected to the city limits, so they have to have their own water and sewer system. Well, now, if they have this dirt work done for 3 years, that maybe in 3 years the city limits will be there, and then they could put up 60 houses on their property using the city sewer and water. So that's my concerns.
Questions? Thank you. Testimony in opposition?
Cole, 4200 North 112th Street. I'm right here. I don't know if this will show up on here, but I'm gonna try it. This is my property in real terms. It's easy to look at this and get lost, but, you know, people do live there. I've spent a lot of time and money developing this property. This is how it actually lays. This is 112th Street. You can see my house is 100 yards or 100 feet from the road. Now, I appreciate the numbers. Everybody likes to crunch numbers. When you come to talk to truckload, the only way to figure out what 800,000 cubic yards is to break it down into truckloads. Average dump truck load is 12 yards. Semi-dump, side dump truckloads are 20. Mike conveniently used the 20. Most, again, the trucks I see running around are the 12-yard trucks. So double his numbers, and that's one way leaving, not coming. So every truck that leaves, an empty one has to come. So that 10 an hour is 20 an hour, which is 80 a day, which is really 160 a day because you got empty and full. Keep that in mind, all the dust that could create on 112th Street, particularly for me and anybody else in the Prairie Pines, and how much disruption of quality of life and value of property during this, if I choose to sell it in this time, does anybody want to buy it and that sort of thing. If you want to see what this much traffic can do to a gravel road, go all the way north on 112th to the mile between Highway 6 and the mile south. I forget what that road is, north of Fletcher. Anyway, there was a temporary site there for aggregate and concrete for Highway 6 construction, stuff that was going on a few years ago. The bottom fell out of that road because there was so much heavy truck traffic on it. The road's never come back. The bottom's still out of it. Every time it rains, you can hardly go down that road. So I'm concerned with the amount of traffic on all the gravel roads, not just my gravel road. And in the event center, I love it. I'm a businessman in Havelock. I love the growth of the event center. It's done wonderful things for Havelock. And it sounds like they want to direct traffic, encourage traffic to stay on 100, or on Havelock Adams to go to 148th or 84th. Okay, in December we got coming up the largest equipment show in the entire country. Now, they're making road changes there to accommodate traffic for the event center. But and every weekend, I go by there every day because that's my short route to town. Every weekend, there's a lot going on at the event center, and we haven't even begun to see what it's going to be till the high school rodeo finals and all that stuff, because the more they expand, the more they're going to do. Are they going to want to run their trucks through by event center during one of those events? No, they're probably going to come down 112th. So ideally, them saying they would like to stay on Havelock Avenue, go to 140th, but at the end, Gaina is going to do what's best for Gaina. If it's a shorter route for their trucks to get 112th and go south, my opinion is most of the construction that has demand for the dirt is south and west, probably more south than west. So they got to get there somehow. Are they going to take Havelock Avenue to 84th? Not unless we restrict them to. They're going to follow the path of least resistance. They don't care how much dust they throw in my face. But these things concern me, and I appreciate the fact that they want to stay away from the wells, but they're not saying that they're going to for sure stay away from that area. They may do a water study later, which allows them to open up back to where they were. And does that require another meeting here for them to expand, the part that they got marked out, which is these areas? Once they do their water information, this may grow, and I don't have a thing to say about it. So anyway, I just want to reiterate that there's a lot going on out here. The event center keeps getting more things. I think that's wonderful. I love that property. I knew Walt myself. I used to go down to plow snow for him so his nurse could get in and give him his medication. I'm a good neighbor. I want Eric to be a good neighbor. I want all of us to get along. I don't want to push the traffic from 112th to Havelock Avenue. There's a lot of acreages up there too. My real question is, there's a demand in Lincoln for this clay. Is there that much demand to put that much impact on this area? If it's that lucrative to sell dirt, he has every right to sell dirt. That's like corn and beans. I have a right to sell it. That doesn't mean it's an ideal location for it. The impact to this area is going to be tremendous when you start doing real numbers. Don't use their numbers, use the real numbers. Their numbers are right if you use the right truck. Most of the trucks I see run around are 12-yard trucks. So I don't want to be a thorn in their side. I don't want them to be a thorn in my side. But if you could tell me we were doing the north leg of the South Byway and there was some flood zones in there and we need a lot of dirt in a short amount of time to build up the road so we can make that road, or we're going to 4-lane 98th Street and go through, and we know there's floodplains along Stevens Creek. We need the dirt. We're going to get in. We're going to get out. This doesn't look like a 3-year project. This looks like a 9 or 10-year project. Do I want to live in that for the next 9, 10 years? No. Do I trust them not to turn me into a dust bowl? No. Do I trust their numbers? I'm sorry, but no. Any questions?
Questions? Thank you.
You bet.
Testimony in opposition.
Joel Armstrong, 10,000 Benton Street. According to his map, I own this property on 112th, across from where they had the potential driveway.
Where is your property, Joe?
It's 112th Street,
Uh-huh.
and it'd be directly across.
To the west?
To the west, correct.
Yep.
In this line right here, I own it to the half-section marker from the trail position, which is right about here.
Mhm.
So this is my stretch in here. I'm very thankful that they're removing this driveway on 112th and going to restrict over here to Havelock. No offense, I have a bone to pick with Gaina. Gaina owes me a windshield that they never paid for from work at the event center. Gaina has also destroyed that road several times with no repair on a timely fashion. I'm real concerned with the county spending the money and the event center spending the money on the concrete that they're doing. I hope to God that the Gaina trucks are not going to bother that concrete, because that asphalt where they turned out, because Gaina did a lot of the mining at the event center, and they created lots of safety hazards. I mean, holes you couldn't see in the dark that could swallow a whole tire without a problem. And it happened more than once. I called at least a half a dozen times during the course of the dirt moving. Again, I have a problem with the dust control. Where are they planning to get their water for? If they have to wet that road, don't they have to put a well in, or are they going to bring that water from somewhere else? If they're going to be pumping that amount of water, what's it going to do to the water table? I'm on a well, Dave's on a well, the people around us are on wells. Is that going to affect the water table problems with the amount of pumping that they're going to need for the dirt control? Again, I also agree with Dave with they're going to take course of least resistance unless they're restricted. They will take 112. The dirt work that was done at the event center, busy time, they're pulling out. They didn't go to 84th. They went to 112th, and they were at 84th. And so they went there. They also went north on 112 when they came out. Needless to say, I believe they were trying to stay off 84th because they were trying to avoid DOT, because they were running over limits. So that is also a safety concern. I'm a CDL driver myself, and I have concerns with, I don't know whether it's legal or not. I see those side dumpers going and they're not locked down. They're secondary locks. They're not locked. And I've seen it and I've called about it before. Isn't it mandatory that that truck be locked down? The pivot side is locked because the trailer can go either way, but the open side, I've never seen a lock locked coming out of the event center in all the time that they did dirt. So I have few reservations with that, but otherwise than that, I understand that they're in the money to make business, and selling dirt makes money. And that's what they need to do, and there's a demand for it, and so I can see that part too. But I do have a concern with the wear and tear on the road system and the dirt and the effect on the wells.
Questions? Thank you. Testimony in opposition.
My name is Sue Colas. I'm the coordinator of the Prairie Pines Partners at the Prairie Pines Nature Preserve. I submitted my comments via your online site, and I can read them again, but I know that I'm hopeful that you have read them. Essentially, I assert that activities related to excavation of large quantity of soils as proposed and the related disturbances significantly increase large specifically increase large truck traffic. Noise and dust will result in significant disturbances that impact the Prairie Pines Nature Preserve habitat and undermine its use and benefit to the public. In addition, the removal of soil from the site for transport to another site does not represent good or sustainable land use. This map, Prairie Pines is here. Mr. Armstrong spoke of his property on the west side of 112th, and he also spoke of where the Murdoch Trail ends at 112th, about a third of a mile north of us. We are working to connect the Murdoch Trail to Nowhere to Prairie Pines, and it would travel along the west side of 112th Street to the northwest corner of Prairie Pines, and there would be a crossing on 112th Street. I have significant concerns about truck traffic at that crossing. Our project is moving forward, and it is hoped that we will have a trail there within 2 years. A large number of our users are families with children, so that is a significant concern for me. And a lot of my thinking comes from the former owner of Prairie Pines, Walt Bagley, who had great interest and concern for the sustainable and good use of land. The soil is good soil. As I put in my comments online, it took hundreds of thousands of years of tall grass prairie and deep-rooted plants to develop that soil. It's why settlers chose to farm here. And its good use is for the production of crops. To have it mined and taken to another site which is unfit for a building, so a building unfit for the site that it is going to be put on, in my mind, is not sustainable use of that site either. But my primary concerns, and I had a very good conversation with the applicant in his respect, and I really appreciate his respectful responses and efforts to find compromise. Should there not be the entrance on 112th Street, it would certainly be a good step, but then it's all the traffic on Havelock, and then that would expose those people to the very concerns that I have on 112th Street. And if there are any other questions of me, I would be glad to take them.
I don't see any. Thank you. Any other testimony in opposition?
My name is Tim Becker, and I live at 7631 Erin Court, which is in Regent Heights at about 84th and Adams Street. And I'm here to testify in opposition. I guess my biggest concern, I'm not going to go through what the people that are more directly impacted can better go through, or what the engineers and environmentalists have pointed out with this. But my biggest concern was when I saw the agenda item and it said final action. And there are some serious traffic issues associated with this. I think we're going to get Havelock Avenue back next month maybe, or the month after. But right now you can't get out there on Havelock. And you can't get out there on Adams Street either, because it's down at 93rd, about 93rd, 95th Street, because a bridge washed out during the rains, which the last I heard, we're being told by the county, things have to be prioritized, which means we know it's a problem, we don't have the money. But then, another time I've been told that we're waiting for FEMA funds. I've got a little bit of experience in working with FEMA funds at the federal level, but those are usually funds that are reimbursed after the work is done, so we're not quite sure exactly when that's going to get fixed. So if you look at it, you don't have Havelock, although we will soon. We don't have Adams, And then, but once we do, then we've got 84th Street. And you might have seen the news articles that have occurred over the last couple of years about the problems that we've had at 84th and Layton. We've got school kids crossing there because of development that has gone on east of 84th Street. All kinds of things. I mean, the city is working with the public school system to try and figure out how are we going to address that, but we've heard everything. We've heard, skywalks or bridges over it. We've heard, we've changed the lighting system there. We've put up flashing lights. A lot of things have been done to address the 84th Street traffic and the volume that's occurred there. And then this project comes up. And we've gone from the beginning of this meeting with an understanding of 10 trucks an hour to now maybe 10 trucks a day, and maybe down 112th Street, but maybe not. I think it's probably going to go down Havelock, because right now if they go down 112th Street, they're going to travel quite a ways south because they can't even get over on Adams because the bridge is out. So I think we've got some serious traffic issues here that need to be looked at. I don't know if that falls within the scope of this board, maybe with a traffic engineer. But again, my concern was when I saw the agenda and it said final action. And I don't think we're there yet, so.
Questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Questions for staff? Applicant rebuttal.
Thank you. I'll just kind of go through the items as they were presented. I'd mentioned, Ms. Olafson, that there's no intention to get near her fence. In fact, I'm willing to work with the planning department and continue the 300-foot buffer from the residence that is off of Havelock to include her property with a 300-foot buffer strip along there. And she made some references to development, and so this is in Tier 3, which is 50-plus years away. It's on the east bank of Stevens Creek, so that's not really going to happen here anytime soon in the conversion of houses. So the gentleman that spoke about, I know Gaina did do some excavation work for the event center. I'm not sure what materialized there, but I know that obviously that whole stretch of road's being improved. The intersection's being improved to handle more traffic because of the event center growth and those various items coming in. And so those improvements will be done here in a couple weeks, is my understanding, and that road will open back up. And so I can't speak to that. What I can speak to is what Mr. Cole mentioned on the trucks. I know that at North Bluff, they primarily use the 20-yard side dumpers, and that's what Mr. Armstrong referred to them using at the event center side. And that's, those are the 20-yard trucks. So the water source, Shanahan's, Gaina, all the big excavating companies have water trucks that they use. So there won't be a well created on site. There won't be any water derived from the site. It'll all be imported on water trucks that they have on the as-needed basis. And yes, I had a good call with Stu from our neighbors to the south and understand the issues of sustainability. And I think this owner has chosen to do that to a large degree in that he's planted it into alfalfa versus row crop, a deep-rooted crop that does help the soil long-term. And of the 150 acres, only 20 acres at a time can be open for the excavation component. So on a given year, 130, majority of the acres will be remaining there in alfalfa and get 3 to 4 cuts a year off of that. So I guess I just wanted to summarize that obviously, the traffic is the concern, and not to say it's not valid, but I would say it's manageable. I think in any of the pits in the county, the traffic is generally manageable. There will be an ebb and a flow. There will be heavy times when they could do up to 10 trucks an hour. There will be weeks where there's really very little activity on the site. There are times over the course of the winter where, depending on the freeze-thaw cycle, if any work at all can even be done on the site. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a pretty restrictive special permit in terms of its expiration, its annual reviews, and a lot of the other requirements, such as the road maintenance agreements, that the applicant will have to enter into. it gives the county the opportunity to ask them to fix things, ask them to control dust and do other things, repair culverts, anything else that can be damaged. So I've spoken with Ken Schroeder about that, and that's what he's going to expect to be in the agreement, and we're fine with that. So, and that is a condition of this permit being approved, is that agreement signed. So, and final action, as you know, just simply means that this is a typical special permit, much like a AGCUP or some other items that get final action at the Planning Commission unless appealed to the higher body. So, with that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions you have.
Your agreement to not use the 112th Street driveway, but to just use the Havelock driveway.
Yes.
Would you be moving that entry,
Oh,
or will you be
thank you
leaving
for
that?
pointing that out. So the terms and conditions of the adjacency to the well is no excavation in that area.
Right.
And again, that's if you go down far enough and would hit a lens of water that would maybe affect their well. So we can't excavate. This is simply this is the existing farm access point that's been approved by the county for site distance. So we really want to maintain that.
Right.
But we won't be excavating. So there will be a crushed rock entrance as part of the SWIP, and then they would come into the area that would be excavated. So I think it really, for safety, it actually needs to stay there, but we won't, the first thing, if this is approved, the first thing we do is we go out and we stake that 1,000-foot radius from those wells, and so they know where their limits are. But it's the best access point safety-wise, the approved one today.
So do we need to amend the motion to say we're restricting it only to the Havelock entrance? Okay.
I think that'd be the best way to do it.
And then I know that she brought up weed control. Is that,
I'm not familiar with that either. I guess this would be like any other property where there's the county noxious weed control people, and so I guess that would be the only time, to my understanding, that there is a landowner is required to do any kind of weed control. I don't know that Eric and his company have received any notices about that, but obviously there's fines associated with that, and so there's a policing instrument there for that.
Good? Everybody good? Other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
I think we're ready for a motion.
okay, I'll try this. So I'm gonna move that we add a condition requiring access to the pit to only be from Havelock. I think that's all I need to say.
And to
right?
approve the special permit.
Yeah. So move it with that amendment.
Right.
Second.
Okay. Motion is on the table. Discussion?
I think,
Well, I'm probably the odd person out here. I find it odd that we had prairie pines today and increased traffic to them, and now we have this project that seems to be a little bit of concern for them. We also drove out to all the properties on Saturday because we have nothing else to do in life. And, we couldn't get anywhere. You couldn't get east, west, anywhere. And I am concerned about the shape of the county roads and the bridges being out. And I am concerned, there are a lot of nasty things that happen at 84th Street, and I'm concerned about that. So I will not vote for the special permit.
Okay. Anybody else?
I will be voting for the special permit. I think that the restriction on 112th Street that has been added and is proposed should help some concerns in terms of accessing streets. Do I think trucks will use 112th? Sure, I do. But on the other hand, one of the many reasons that we build roads is to facilitate travel, and in this case, commerce. There's a lot of benefits that that this dirt will provide in terms of elevating buildings around our community and literally supporting those buildings. And that dirt has to come from somewhere. And I don't think that this is necessarily all that bad of a site, especially given the composition of the clay there. And yes, it's tier 3, but eventually this is a relatively short time frame that we're talking about in the long term. And the city will eventually move east out here, maybe not in anyone's near future, but this will eventually become more urban.
I also will be supporting having worked with Gaina on their south project and so on. They have well maintained that dig out of soil, and I think that I agree with Tom that shutting off the north 112th entrance will eliminate a lot of the truck traffic, and there's going to be some, there's no question, but I would support this.
I kind of feel like my workplace is a dirt excavation site right now, so I know, I appreciate your concerns with the Gaina trucks. I mean, it's not necessarily Gaina doing where I work, but I know what trucks you're talking about. So it is kind of like playing Frogger as you drive through. But I don't know a whole heck of a lot about soil excavation, so I'm leaning on my fellow commissioners that do, and I'll probably support this.
I'm going to support the motion. If we in our community and county had to depend on sites to build buildings on that supported buildings in their natural state, we would have very few buildings built. So to be able to mine soil like this for this, I don't think this is a stretch, for the benefit of the community, I think is a good thing. Whenever we have one of these in front of us, I always lean on the fact that there are a lot of controls in place if they need to be called upon for dust control, traffic control, road reconstruction or improvement of damaged roads. So that's all in place, and I think we have to trust that. It's part of, I think, our thought process and decision process. So I feel good about that, and so as I said, I'm going to support the motion. And again, I think the other thing about this is it's a 3-year permit. I think that's a big deal, that this can't go on and on and on for an extended period of time, or a time that never ends. So I'm going to support the motion. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, this will be for the conditional approval of special permit 19032 as amended. Beckius?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
No.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Share.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-1.
At this time, anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda may do so. I think we're adjourned. Thank you.